right, Shabbat Shalom for the second time tonight. I am once again on camera. This is kind of, I'm very self-conscious about it. Obviously, I'm not usually on camera, but we're trying some new stuff out. And so I have to be careful not to make any funny faces or gang signs while I'm up here reading. And I'm going to try my best to behave, or any, occult symbolism. And Shabbat Shalom again for the second time tonight. I'm really glad you could all be here. And this is going to be a really busy week for me because we are getting ready to winterize ourselves. This is our 8th annual winter in Florida, and we're leaving this week. Next week, I'll be coming to you from there, and I'll give more details as we go along. But so I'm basically a part-time Floridian, even if the Florida people don't see it that way. I'm a part-time Floridian. So Michael, welcome. And are you there?
Yes,
there he
Shabbat
is.
Shalom. Yes, absolutely.
And I will remind and you coming in loud and clear. I will remind everyone here listening live to, if you want to speak, be sure to raise your hand. There should be a button you can push for that in this new program we're trying out, and we could see that. We could bring you on. Of course, Michael and I will give our presentation at first, but at the end, what we'll do is anyone who wants to speak, we can bring you up on the stage. And then I don't know how many people can come up on the stage, if it could be endless, like 100 people, or if it's max out of 10, we'll find out tonight. But feel free to raise your hands. We'll bring you on stage. We'll have a conversation, and we're going to go ahead and get right to it tonight. So this is, would anybody like to volunteer to pray? See, this is the option. We could try this out and see if you guys want to step up to the stage and pray. Come up to the microphone. Anybody want to raise their hands? See, now you guys can hide in the audience tonight. Oh, I got someone raising their hands. All right. And there you are. You're up. Unmute yourself and let's pray and get going.
Thank you, Heavenly Father. We come before you on this Shabbat day. We thank you for all that you do for us and all that you give us. We just pray that everything we do and say will be honor and glory to your precious name. We just pray that what the teaching is tonight for Noel and Michael will be able to present clearly and succinctly, and just pray that it will fall on ears to hear and eyes to see. And we thank you for each and everything that you do for us, Father. We're so grateful that we know your son, Yeshua, and we just pray this in Yeshua HaMashiach's name. Amen.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the passage tonight. And, I said that, and this is awful. I actually lost the passage. So let me pull this up real quick. And give me 1 second, guys. It's a little bit more awkward to do this when I'm on camera. I think we're on Genesis 16. Yep. All right, here we go. I'll be reading from Genesis chapter 16 tonight, and we'll see if we'll make it through 17. I think we will. But Sarah, the wife of Abram, had not borne to him, but he had a handmaid, a Mesritha, that would be an Egyptian, and her name was Hagar, a daughter of Pharaoh, whom he gave to him as a handmaid at the time that he received her, being struck by the word from before Yahuwah. And of course, you guys will remember what they were struck with. I think we talked about that 2 or 3 weeks ago. And Sarah said to Abram, "Behold now, Yahuwah hath restrained me from bearing. Go to my handmaid and set her free. Perhaps I may be builded by her." And Abram hearkened to the word of Sarah. And Sarah, the wife of Abram, took Hagar, the Mesritha, handmaid, when Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and set her free, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to wife. And he went unto Hagar, and she conceived. That was fast. And she saw that she had conceived, and the honor of her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarah said to Abram, "All my affliction is from thee, being secure that thou wouldst do me justice. I left the hand and house of my father, and came up with thee to a foreign land. And forasmuch as I was not able to become a mother, I set free my handmaid and gave her to lie in thy bosom, and she see that she had conceived, and mine honor is despised before her. But now is my affliction manifest before Yahuwah, who will spread peace between me and thee, and the land shall be replenished from us. Nor shall we need the help of the progeny of Hagar, the daughter of Pharaoh Bar Nimrod, who threw thee into the furnace of fire. She's reminding him of what his new wife has, what her granddaddy did to him. And Abram said to Sarah, behold, thy handmaid is under thy authority. Do to her what is right in thine eyes. And Sarah afflicted her, and she escaped from before her. And the angel of Yahuwah found her at the fountain of waters in the desert, at the fountain of waters which is in the way to Chagra. And he said, Hagar, handmaid of Sarah, whence comest thou, and whither dost thou go? And she said, from before Sarah my mistress I have escaped. And the angel of Yahuwah said to her, return to thy mistress, and be subject under her hand. And the angel of Yahuwah said to her, multiplying I will multiply thy sons, and they shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of Yahuwah said to her, behold, thou art with child, and thou wilt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishmael, because thy affliction is revealed before Yahuwah. And he shall be like the wild ass among men. His hand shall take vengeance of his adversaries, and the hands of his adversaries he put forth to do him evil. And in the presence of his brethren shall he be commingled, and shall dwell. It says there, Arabized, like, I guess you become Arabian. And she gave thanks before Yahuwah, whose words spake to her, and thus said, thou art he who livest and art eternal, who seest, but art not seen. For she said, for behold, here is revealed the glory of the Shekinah of Yahuwah after a vision. Wherefore she called the well at which the living and eternal one was revealed. And behold, it is situated between Rechem and Chalutza. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was the son of 86 years when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael for first rounds of commentary.
All right, Shabbat Shalom. This is a little bit getting used to here, but so normally I don't talk about personal life, but I just wanted to say today that we had a great Shabbat. We're starting a new Enoch study, and we read 9 chapters today as a group, and it was awesome, and we got deep, and it felt great to be able to open up and talk about things that most people don't like to talk about. So I just wanted to praise y'all for that. Okay, so I'm going to start on verse 1. So now Sarah, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Yahweh is Yahushua, in her prayer tonight said to be able to elaborate more. And I'm not the best storyteller, so I need to do a better job of that, and especially with these word studies. So hopefully I can present themselves clearly for you guys. So the first one I want to do is handmaid. And she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, and I found it interesting. So Genesis 29, we're going to get to it in a little bit. Laban gathered all the people of the place and held a feast. Now in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob had relations with her. Laban also gave his female slave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a slave. So that female slave is the same as handmaid. And I thought it was interesting that Jacob's in the line of Abram. And then also we're going to talk about later where these mistresses are only for the females. And I'm going to point that out in a bit. But I thought it was interesting that Laban gave his daughter Leah this female handmaid or slave Zilpah. Okay, and the next one was Psalms 1:23. It says, to you I have raised my eyes, you who are enthroned in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a female servant, same word as handmaid and slave, to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God until he's gracious to us. So again, these word studies to me just connect a lot. And this is basically saying, as the eyes of a female servant to the hand of her mistress, aka Hagar and Sarah and Zilpah and Leah. So our eyes look to the Lord our God until he is gracious to us. So it's kind of the same kind of relationship. And we'll talk more about that. The Palestinian Targum says, but Sarah, the wife of Abram, had not borne to him, but he had a handmaid, a Misrita, and her name was Hagar, a daughter of Pharaoh. Sure, no, we'll get into that. Whom he gave to him as a handmaid at the time that he received her, being struck by the word from before the Lord. So I want to talk about what like some Jewish commentators would say about this passage. They taught that when Pharaoh saw what God did on Sarah's behalf, Pharaoh gave his daughter to Sarah. The reasoning that it would be better for his daughter to be a handmaid in Sarah's house than a mistress in another house. So they read, and this is interesting, they read the name Hagar to mean a reward, or Agar, A-G-A-R, imagining Pharaoh to say, here is your reward, or here is your Agar. And then another one says, some identified Hagar with Keturah, and I know Noah has talked about Keturah a lot. So this is the woman that Abraham married after the death of Sarah, stating that Abraham sought her out after Sarah's death. So what they're doing is they're suggesting that Keturah was Hagar's personal name, and that Hagar was either the reward or and other people say stranger. The famous Rabbi Rashi argues that Keturah was a name given to Hagar because her deeds were as beautiful as incense. And the Hebrew word Keturis, so Keturah is Keturah, Keturis, Ketores, is a pleasant offering in the temple. So what he was saying is that it's probably similar to that, and that it was an incense. Okay, so number 2. KJV says, and Sarah said unto Abram, behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah. So found a commentary that I thought it described it pretty well, and it kind of gives context about the ancient Near East. So a concubine in the ancient Near East was a legal wife who was elevated from servant status by her marriage. So her increased status did not, however, equal that of the chief wife, who was always a free woman. And Paul talks about the free woman and the slave woman. Although a legitimate wife to her husband, a concubine remained a servant to her mistress, who could discipline or sell her at will. So receiving free status and giving birth often added confusion to her status in the family and threatened to reverse her importance with that of the chief wife. So as we continue to read, you're going to see Sarah get upset and send Hagar away, and this kind of gives you like context of the Near East, ancient Near East, which talks about these kind of relationships. I'll go more 4, and then I'll hand off to Noel. And he went unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And so, word study with that word mistress. There was a few more, but I found these ones that kind of correlate. So Psalms 123, we already read it. So I'm going to read it again, but it's the same word in this one. So to you I raise my eyes, you who are enthroned in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a female servant to the hand of her mistress. So our eyes look to the Lord our God. So I already commented on that in verse 1. But the same word, mistress, in verse 4 is the same word in Psalms 123. So it just gives you kind of another perspective. So let's see. And her mistress was despised in her eyes. She didn't like that. We'll talk more about that. And then finally, and then I'll hand off to Proverbs 30:21 says, under 3 things the earth quakes, and under 4 it cannot endure. Under a slave when he becomes a king, and a fool when he is satisfied with food. This was interesting. Under an unloved woman when she gets a husband, a female servant when she dispossesses her mistress. Again, there's root word probably has 30 versions of mistress. This is the exact same word found in verse 4, and it kind of describes what we're talking about here. This proverb, a female servant when she dispossesses her mistress, and under an unloved woman when she gets a husband. I don't know, it kind of relates to this verse in Genesis. I have a decent amount left on 16, but I'll hand off to Noel.
Commentaries on this, and it seems like this nags what we're reading nags at every single person. I was reading one commentary that literally said that Abraham sinned, and what he and Sarah should have done is gone to the doctor's office to deal with their infertility. I'm like, what century are we reading this commentary on here? Um, I want to. What's obvious here is how quickly the tables have turned, and I think that's where Michael ended here on verse 4. So just see how. Just I'll read this again and see how this plays out. And Sarah, the wife of Abram, hold on here. And Sarah, the wife of Abram, took Hagar, the Egyptian handmaid, whom Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and set her free, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to wife. Okay, I guess it's I read verse 3, verse 4. And he went unto Hagar, and she conceived. That was quick. And she saw that she had conceived, and the honor of her mistress was despised in her eyes. So yeah, that went south really, really quickly. All right. Now, I pointed out when I was reading it, Michael brought it up. This is different than the Masoretic in that we see here, it identifies Hagar as the daughter of Pharaoh. Okay, that's big news, because now we know where she's coming from genetically, but it doesn't end there. It says, and I will point out again, it was Sarah who reminded Abraham when Sarah is despised. She hands him, this is like one of those things when you get into the polygyny debate, and the husband and the wife, they'll be like, oh, we can handle this. We can handle another wife. Sarah thought the same thing. And they bring Hagar in, and she's like, okay, she's like, Abraham, what did you do? This is all you. You did this. And she quickly reminds him and said, just so you know, this woman who you took, her granddaddy is Nimrod. This is the same guy who tried to threw you into a fiery furnace. Not only that, we need to kind of undress. That's the wrong phrase to use. We need to look closer at what's going on here. All right. I am convinced that Nimrod and Gilgamesh are the same people. Many people are. I'm not the first to say this. Well, if you've ever read the Epic of Gilgamesh, the narrative as it starts is that Gilgamesh is a wicked, actually kind of a demonic entity. He's kind of like a spiritual entity, a giant, and he is his greatest sin is that he has passed a law that he gets conjugal rights to every bride on their wedding night. Now, you might be asking, why would he do that? Aside of the pleasure of, sexual intercourse, like perversion, whatever. Well, he's actually playing by the same, he's going by the same playbook as Ham. So if you've ever read another really interesting historical read, The Travels of Noah Through Europe, you find out that Ham, when he comes off the ark, he's actually the original Pan, the god Pan. So when you think of Pan, that's actually Ham. He was a pedophile and all sorts of stuff. Well, what Ham was doing was when Noah was going around the earth, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and he's actually dividing lands, inheritances amongst his three sons, and he's putting kings on thrones. Ham is actually going and dethroning each of them, and he's putting his own children on. Well, who was Ham? Ham is, I believe he's circumcised. He's the son of the lineage of Satan, whereas Japheth and Shem are not. So Nimrod is doing the same thing. When he's not trying to kill someone like Abraham, who is prophesied to overtake his kingdom, he's going and planting his children, their bums on different seats in order to expand his own kingdom. I believe this was a huge part of the Genesis 14 war. And this is where we go back to the conjugal rights. If Gilgamesh / Nimrod can get if he can get the first ball past the goalie, if he could score the first shot, then he has more children that he can play around with, right? He has more leverage all over the kingdom. So we see the same thing here. Now, Sarah hands over the keys to the kingdom to Nimrod's granddaughter. So his plan is working. And Abraham goes along with it. And it's terrifying to think how close this is. We saw the same thing with Eliezer, who is Nimrod's either son or grandson. And he was Abraham's most trusted servant. And Abraham's like, I'm going to give the keys of the kingdom to him. And Yahuwah's like, no, you're not. You're not giving it to him. He is not going to inherit. Neither is Hagar. And so just that's kind of seems like the struggle going on here. It's pretty epic, all that we're looking at. All right, let's see. What else do we see here? Verse 2. And Sarah said to Abram, behold, now Yahuwah hath restrained me from bearing. Go to my handmaid and set her free. Perhaps I may be builded by her. And Abram hearkened to the word of Sarah. So another really interesting component of this chapter is we're seeing Abram especially, I believe, had faith in Yahuwah that he was going to come through on his end. But you clearly see that Abram and Sarah are, or I guess Sarai, are really struggling with this faith, right? They're trying to, they're like, how is this going to work out? We know that we believe Yahuwah is going to keep to his word, but we don't know how that's going to happen. So maybe we need to go about this ourselves. I totally understand this. I mean, I've said this many times before. My wife and I, we struggled for years trying to have children. It was so difficult watching dozens of people all around us. We were from Southern California, and they would have child after child, and they'd be like, oh, another child, like, oh, that was another mistake. Why do we keep having children? This is such a burden on our lives. And my wife and I would just be like, can we just have a child? That would be amazing. That would be a true gift from Yah. I totally get this. I totally get that Sarah, she's becoming an old woman. She's never had children. Think about how this would be perceived by everyone around them. And I'll get more into their names a little bit later, or perhaps Michael will. And so it is true, I suppose, that Yahuwah had restrained Sarah from bearing. I mean, that's obvious. She placed it on him and not on herself. You see that here. She says, Yahuwah hath restrained me from bearing. All right. So what does she ultimately mean by that? She gets it that if she has a child, it's from him. And if she doesn't, it's also because of him. But what is she ultimately getting at here? The pain of blaming Elohim for one's problem is also a sickness that happens. Is she actually blaming him? I guess that's what I'm getting at. I don't really know. I'll let you figure that out. And is unbelief a sin? That's another question I had while studying this. And I'm looking for commands, right, of the in the Torah. Does it say that unbelief is a sin? And I want to be real careful about adding to sins, but I would say it is. And here's why. Here's one. I could show you multiple passages, but here's one from Mark 1:15, and it states that belief is necessary along with repentance. Not repenting is obviously remaining in your transgression. Not believing is also remaining in a transgression. It says, the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of Elohim is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. You have to repent and believe. If you don't believe, and this is a Revelation 14:12. I mean, you've got to repent of your transgressions of the Torah, and you have to believe in the good news of Yahushua HaMashiach. And if you fail at those, you're on a slippery slope. If you refuse to repent or you refuse to believe. So was Sarah lacking in belief? I'll leave this for you guys to decide. We could discuss this afterwards. It seems as though they both struggle with it. I said this before. And I'm kind of torn on her quip to Abraham, and I'll let you guys discuss that. Now, consider for a moment her pain. I had suggested this earlier, but you have the pain of prayers not yet answered. How many of you prayed passionately for something, and you believed it was Yah's will, and it's like, why is this not coming to fruition? I mean, think about this day in and day out. She's watching, Abraham is watching all around him in Canaan, as these family dynasties are forming and so on and so forth, and he's got nothing, right? So you have the pain of, you have the pains of arms that have never yet held her own child. That's pretty painful. The pain of public shame, what everyone was saying about her and how she was not blessed by Yah. I mean, here Abraham is believing he's going to be the father of nations. Think how laughable that was, right? Decades have gone by now. And then we see this here in Proverbs 13:12. I love this passage. It says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, which could describe Sarah's heart. Her heart is sick because hope is deferred. But when the desire comes, it is a tree of life. The problem I'm having, again, with so much commentary, as I mentioned, is that commentators love to prod and point out sin on the part of Abraham and Sarah. I'm trying to find out if there's actually sin here. I read, and as I pointed out a few minutes ago, I read one commentator who actually said Abraham and Sarah should have gone to the doctor's office for infertility issues. And it's like, serious? Like, this was like a serious commentary too. And I wish I were making this up. There's a lot going on here with Hagar, and it seems like a lot of people are uncomfortable with the situation, with the arrangement. And they'd rather push Western values on a very Eastern situation. And so again, we're in polygamy territory, and I don't need to go on into that again. I think that's going to be good for my. I have a lot more, obviously, to say. This is kind of the introduction, and no, let's go into this here, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to verse 5. Michael, I'm not going to cover anything I don't think that you're going to cover. And earlier tonight, I was reading from the Book of Gleanings, and I probably need to give a quick introduction on this again. I am not stating that this is spirit breathed, that this is not scripture. I'll stress, I do not believe it is scripture. What I do believe is that it is an incredible historical book written in Egypt around the time of the Exodus. The people who wrote this were contemporaries of Moshe. They were priests. I think that they were in line with the priests of Jethro. They believed that there was a creator Elohim, a most high. They believed there were many Elohim, but there was one above all, that he was the true creator. And the sins of humanity is that they didn't worship the creator, they worshiped idols, and that the most high despised these idols. And it's just a phenomenal read. All right. And this is something that I read in the in here that I think ties up with the Genesis 14 war. And I'm not saying it is a Genesis 14 war, but I think it may be the same event or the whereabouts. And remember now, this is what Sarah reminds Abraham of. She says, this Hagar you took as a wife, I need to remind you that she's the daughter of Pharaoh Bar Nimrod, the son of Nimrod, who threw thee into the furnace of fire. All right. So pay attention to this passage here. And again, I think this is the context of the Genesis 14 war. Time passed, and this character named Herminator. I don't believe he's the same person as Abraham, just so we set the record straight. But this is prophet person who is completely against Nimrod and his whole kingdom. Time passed, and Herminator came frequently to the court, and he was well favored. But it came about that strife arose in the lands about. It was a time of turmoil when the hand of brother was against brother. And all the while, Herminator rose in the esteem of the queen. So he's in the court of this queen. And interestingly, it talks about one of the sins of this queen is that she took on many husbands. And it said that is not for a woman to do. So she basically wanted to be like a king and, do what a king does. So it came about that a son was born to Herminator and Dadi. And the Dadi here is not against Sarah, but I'll quickly kind of give you guys some context here. This Herminator character, he's the same character from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, so in the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have Gilgamesh, who is an evil, wicked tyrant, giant Nephilim. He's actually like an evil spirit, who is Nimrod. And then you have this other character, Ikendu. And he is a wild man that comes in to challenge Gilgamesh. We'll just call him Nimrod. I believe that this is the true account that we get in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And here, the Enkidu character is actually two separate people. All right, so don't get confused by this. But this will tie into the chapter. This is all for a purpose. All right, so Herminator, his wife Dadi, was actually a prostitute who he fell in love with and loved when nobody else would, and he took her as a wife, and that caused a lot of problems. Anyways, while the lands about had been ravaged by war, there was peace in Kithim. But when the son of Herminator and Deidi was scarce 1 year old, men came bearing tidings of war. The host of the king had gathered, and voices were crying in the marketplace. Now, the host of the king, this is the Nimrod character. Okay, he's coming in to kill everybody, and this is what the criers say: prepare to die, for those who are mightier than the Humbala are upon us. None shall be spared from the fire of the pits, neither old men nor women and children. And this is what really tripped me out. For those who came were the children of Githsad. Well, who is Githsad, you might ask? It says, the serpent, the cunning one, whose mother was one of those who brought defilement into the race of men. So it's actually saying here that this king, Nimrod, and his armies, they are the children of Githsad, the serpent, the cunning one. The same serpent we saw in the garden. Here they call it Garden Land, which is, again, adorable that they call Eden Garden Land. These people knew neither justice nor mercy, which again is ironic since those children in Babylon basically invented what historians say, like law and such. But they're saying here, like, they know nothing of justice or mercy. That's all just a ruse. And that comes from the Book of Gleanings, chapter 7. Really fascinating passage. The passage goes into the death of a character named Yaddle. Okay, so why am I talking about Yaddle? I think it plays into this chapter I'll get onto on my next round of commentary. Yaddle is a wild man. Okay, well, what is a wild man? A wild man is like they're depicted in old artwork like Sasquatches. They're like these green men. They lived in the wilds and they were hunted. They're really crazy characters. Well, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Kindu is a wild man. Okay, so here you have Herminator. It sounds like the Terminator. People were sharing that GIF. That was kind of funny. Herminator's best friend is a guy named Yaddle. He's a wild man. These are the two that confronted Nimrod, the king. And Yaddle is the same. Okay, is the same character. So this is what's interesting too. Herminator is a skewed version of ancient Egyptian Hieromeneter, and notes. And let's see. And Herminator's other name is given as Hankada, which is a different spelling of Enkidu. So this Herminator is the same character as Enkidu in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is fascinating because this book, the Book of Gleanings, lines up with Genesis. So here we are seeing a historical account that's giving credence to the fact that Nimrod is Gilgamesh. But then we have a wild man. And one of the fascinating things about wild men is that in this book, there's one passage where Herminator goes looking for Yaddle and he can't find him. He later finds him and Yaddle says, "Oh, I was there the whole time, but you couldn't see me because I slipped out of the material world." And that's one of the things that the wild men can do. They can slip in and out of the realm. They're like a spiritual creature. They can be physical and then disappear. That's what people claim Sasquatches do. That's really fascinating. So, and I'll talk more about this when we come back. Michael, back to you for your portion of the commentary.
All right. How can I follow Herminator? That's just awesome. So Josh, I'm hoping you can still film what I'm about to drop in the general voice chat. So for the new people, we're still using the general voice chat for texting, but yeah, we're in this TUC stage for the voice. But okay, he is a professional. Okay, awesome. Okay, so number 5. So and Sarah said unto Abram, "My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. When she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her own eyes." So I'm going to skip one word study, but into thy bosom, because I thought it fits again with these slaves and the masters. 2 Samuel 12 says, 7, Nathan said to David, "You yourself are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. It is I who anointed you as king over Israel, and it is I who rescued you from the hand of Saul. I also gave you your master's house and put your master's wives into your care." And so that's the into your care word is into thy bosom. And it's still talking about kind of like a slave into his bosom, into his care. kind of parallel. So David and Abraham. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to post in there is, let's see, there it is. Not exactly, guys, but Eve and Sarah comparison. So I just found out that was interesting. The woman answered, and so Sarah said to Abraham, "Listen to the voice of your wife, and listen now." So Sarah's saying, "Listen now." She took some. Sarah took Hagar, her Egyptian slave girl. She also gave some to her husband and gave her to Abram. So I thought that was probably the best one. It was the woman you put with me. The snake tempted me. This outrage done to me is your fault. So it's basically blame, right? So just kind of a comparison between Eve and Sarah. And we always talk about it, the repetitiveness of the father. And we're still in chapter 17, and he repeats himself so much. We're children, and we need to hear it a bunch of times to learn it. So I'm not going to read the Palestinian. Noel did a good job on that. I just want to highlight the Pharaoh bar Nimrod threw thee into the furnace of the fire. It was funny. I think it was during the Keturah stuff. It's so funny. I was doing trying to find research on the Keturah, and I ended up finding an unexpected cosmology article. So I thought that was funny. Good job, Dave, with the SEO. But so I want to make the claim that what if it isn't Nimrod? Like, what if this is a different Pharaoh? And some say that Hagar's father was the Pharaoh named Rikkion, whose historic name is Suzeragne Kayan. So I'm going to post that. The name Rikkion is probably not a name, but a title. It comes from two words, Rish and Gideon. The first means the poor one, and the latter means the one from the east. We talked about people from the east. But let me put this, what I found in Wiki. Who he is. Suzerain Kayan was a Hyksos king. He's one of the more famous kings. His name means the one, and this is what they're saying. His royal name, Susaron, translates as the one whom Ra has caused to be strong. And the reason why I'm just throwing this out there, I don't know if the dates line up, is because Jasher kind of talks about it. So Jasher 14 says that name. This is probably small, so get out your glasses. Okay, you can probably see it if you blow it up a little bit. So this is Jasher 14. I'm not going to read everything, but I just kind of want to show you who this guy is. The king heard the words of Rikkion, found grace in his sight. The king answered, said to Rikkion, "Thy name should be called no more Rikkion, but Pharaoh shall be thy name." So he changes his name to Pharaoh. They loved his wisdom. But here's what I kind of wanted to say on 30. They made Rikkion Pharaoh under Osiris, king of Egypt, and he governed Egypt. Rikkion Pharaoh cunningly usurped the government of Egypt and exacted a tax from all the inhabitants of Egypt. So the inhabitants loved him. Now the reason why it's kind of in the middle. So this is Joshua 14. You go to Joshua 13. It's Abraham's story. Joshua 15, Abraham's story. So it's kind of a weird place. Put it, unless this was possibly the Pharaoh. And then, so I found a summary on this chapter. It kind of just goes a little bit extra. So the book of Joshua makes a slight departure, like I was saying, from Abraham to inform readers about the first man who is called Pharaoh. This chapter of Joshua also points out that the Egyptians were technically the descendants of Ham, son of Noah, and it is obvious the knowledge of resurrection was passed down to them from their forefathers, who were Noah and Ham. So another deviation from the biblical literature in Joshua states that Abraham taught the Egyptians the knowledge of the stars and the Creator's plan for redemption, which were written in the stars. While Nimrod started to change that, which was taught before him by introducing idols, it was Abraham who brought the sacred knowledge of back to Ur, or formerly known as Babel. So that was just a summary of that chapter. That's what I found. But I thought it was interesting that this Rikkion guy was sandwiched in between the Abraham story. So I'm just throwing it out there that maybe it's not Nimrod per se, or Rikkion. Number 7, Palestinian says, "And the angel of the Lord found her at the fountains of waters in the desert, at the fountain of the waters in the way of Chagra." So real quick, some examples of the angel of the Lord. We know these, but just kind of help you out. So the angel of the Lord appears to Abraham. We'll get to it in a few weeks. Exodus appears to Moses in a flame. Appears to the prophet Balaam. Appears to Israel in Judges. Gideon in Judges. Manoah and his wife in Judges. Zechariah, the angel of the Lord pleads with the Father to have mercy on Jerusalem, the cities of Judah. And finally, the angel of the Lord takes away the sin of the high priest, Joshua, one of my favorite chapters. Zechariah 3. And then, but it's interesting because in the New Testament, the angel of the Lord is used several times, but in one instance, Luke 1, 11 through 19, the angel's name is Gabriel. So is it, a lot of people say it's Yeshua, a lot of people, some might say it's Michael, but the New Testament says Gabriel. So maybe it's just a different angel each time. I don't know. What do you guys think? So I'm going to go up to wild beast, I guess. That's 12. So I have a little bit on 8. So it says, and he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence thou comest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarah. So this is kind of talking about similar thing I talked about the first time. So Hagar was not a wife, in quotes, a slave who was providing a service to her mistress husband. So it was common practice for barren women, their husbands, to adopt the children of the husband born from a slave. So also notice that, and this is what I was kind of mentioning before, also notice that Hagar is never mentioned as Abram's slave or his concubine or his wife. In the biblical text, she is always described as Sarah's property, even by the angel in this verse, number 8, who confronted Hagar in 16:8. He said, Hagar, mistress of Sarah. You know, he could have said, oh, it's Abraham's concubine, but even the angel, for whatever reason, gives the property to the woman. What do you guys make about that? Take notes, and I'd love to hear what you think. Number 10, angel of the Lord again says, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. So a word study that I thought fit. I asked Stephanie, I deleted a bunch of word studies because I can talk forever, and sometimes people get lost on those. But I kept the ones that I thought kind of relate exactly. So Genesis 24, let's see, where do I want to go? It's talking about Rebecca. So, and they said, oh, this is the story when Abraham's servant goes and gets Rebecca for his wife. So, and they said, we will call the young man and ask her. Then they called Rebecca and said, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. They sent away their sister Rebecca and her nurse with Abraham's servant. Remember, we talked about Eliezer possibly being this servant. They blessed Rebecca and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants or thy seed possess the gate of those who hate them. So again, I just thought it was cool that the word thy seed, you know, it could have just been fruit or anything, but that same word is talking about another promised patriarch, right? And Rebecca. So I thought that was cool. Number 11, the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. So, little fun fact, Ishmael is the first person recorded in the Bible to have given a name before he was born. Some other instances, Isaac, Solomon, and Josiah, and I believe Yeshua, possibly, but these were just Old Testament passages, right? So that was cool. So what do you guys think about that? Ishmael, and we'll see, at least I'll bring it up, that you know, Yahuwah loved Ishmael. There might be some, I don't know, but what do you think about that? He was the first person recorded by the name given before he was born. Okay, last one I'll hand off to Noel. This is number 12. This is talking about the wild man. So, and he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hands against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So, in the Samaritan Torah version of this verse, Ishmael was described in the book of Genesis 16 as a fertile of man instead of a wild ass of man, as suggested in the Masoretic. So what does fertile mean? You know, we'll get to it, but it says many nations will come from him, right? So also in the Septuagint, I'm going to drop this in there. It's they say that it's a rustic man. He shall be a rustic man. This means a countryman living in the rural areas of the wilderness. So Septuagint, which a lot of people think it's more accurate, doesn't say wild ass of a man. It says he will be a rustic man. Does it fit better? What do you guys think? And finally, the Greek text suggests that this is the land which is wild rather than the man himself being wild, Ishmael. I think that makes more sense. So additional verses on Ishmael, like I said, Genesis, Abraham loved Ishmael. Ishmael was blessed in his ways, Genesis 17:20. God was with the lad. He was with Ishmael in 21:20, a very rare statement in the Torah that God was with him. And Ishmael appeared with Isaac at the burial of Abraham. So I'll end it there, but that was stuff on wild man and some little bit of Ishmael. I only have a few left, and then I'm ready for 17. You have to know.
Right, thank you, Michael. Yeah, and to what you said about the different angels, like one of them was Gabriel, right? The angel of the Lord, the angel of Yahuwah. I think the different angel idea supports more of the idea that the speaker is a representative of Yahuwah rather than Yahuwah. And it actually, again, in my opinion, pulls away from the Trinitarian idea that everyone, every time the angel appears, it's Yahuwah or Yeshua, Jesus, and that he's really the Most High. And so some of them might be Yahusha speaking, but I'm not convinced of that. I think that these different angels of Yahuwah may very well be speaking on behalf of Yahuwah and on behalf of the Word. And one more just addition to what you said is I agree that I think Yahuwah loved Ishmael very much. And in fact, Abraham did too. What was the first thing that Abraham responded when he was said, Ishmael's not going to be the seed of inheritance? And he said, he's it's good. Oh, he said he didn't say that. He said it'll be through Sarah. And Abraham immediately shot back and said, but what about Ishmael? I mean, that was his first thought. He really cared about Ishmael. And I think he was loved by everyone. And we'll dig into that right now. Now, in verse 10, when the angel of Yahuwah said, now we don't know who the angel of Yahuwah is here, not identified. I'd have to look more closely. Maybe it is, but the angel of Yahuwah said to her, Hagar, multiplying, I will multiply thy seeds, and they shall not be numbered for multitude. And okay, well, if you read further in the Targum, and it would be if Michael and I go through the series, it'll be like 4 to 5 years before we ever make it this far. So you'll forget about this by the time I get there again. In Deuteronomy chapter 33, I think there's one more chapter, like 34, and then it ends it. Deuteronomy 33:2, it has a fascinating passage, and it is this. And he said, speaking here is Moshe, he's about to die. These are like his last words. Yahuwah was revealed at Sinai to give the Torah and to his people of Beth Yasharel. And the splendor of the glory of his Shekinah arose from Gibal to give itself to the sons of Esau. Wait, what? But they received it not. It shined forth in majesty and glory from Mount Faran. Keep in mind, a completely different mountain, not Sinai, Mount Faran, to give itself to the sons of Ishmael, but they received it not. Wait, what? It returned and revealed itself in holiness unto his people of Beth Yasharel, and with him 10,000 times 10,000 holy angels. He wrote with his own right hand and gave them his law and his commandments out of the flaming fire. All right, so what I'm reading here is that this is when Yahuwah is bringing the Torah to Yasharel out in the wilderness from Mount Sinai. He is saying that he wants them to be kings and priests of this Torah, and they reject it. They reject the Torah. It's the story of humanity, folks. I mean, everybody rejects it. Everybody wants to do away with it. Christianity rejected it for the most part, not fully, but generally speaking, Catholicism rejected it. And here we see that it was offered to Esau and to Ishmael, and they rejected it. So it seems to me that when he's speaking here to Hagar, he's got Ishmael and his sons in mind. It'd be like, okay, if Abraham's son Yitzchak through Sarah, if he rejects it, then I'm going back to Ishmael. And keep in mind that Yasharel did reject it. He basically said, well, okay, I'm giving it to somebody, and it's going to be you guys. And of course, he ended up killing a lot of them because they rebelled against it. So it's crazy that the story of humanity is nobody. I can't, I don't want to overgeneralize. I can't say nobody, but you guys know what I mean. 99.9% of humanity rejects his Torah. They do not want to be in a covenant. They want to be in a covenant, but not by the rules. They don't want to play by the rules. And I'll get more into that probably in the next chapter. All right, the next thing that Michael pointed out here is, I just once more want to reiterate like how interesting that would have been if history completely changed And it was through the Arabians, not through the Jews and the tribes of Israel, that uh, the law came about. Now, what I also find interesting about that is that when we get into the next chapter, I'll bring it up again. The Who were the sons of Ishmael? It talks about 12 princes, 12 tribes. So there's a contrast and a comparison between the sons of Yaakov, the 12 tribes of Yaakov, and the 12 tribes of Ishmael. Well, what are these 12 tribes? I don't know where the 12 tribes are. I guess they exist. Nobody seems to know. The genealogies have been scrubbed, but for the most part. But the thing is that I feel like if the Torah didn't go to the sons of Yasharel, it would have been the same way. They probably would have been extinct. They would have just been a nobody nomads in the desert. They would have been, and had the sons of Esau or Ishmael accepted the Torah, we would have all known who they were. They would have been in the news. They would the people running the media, right? So actually, that's not true, because the actual sons of Israel are not running the media. That was an error on my part. All right, moving on to the wild ass among men. So it literally says that I looked this up in the Hebrew, and maybe the Paleo Hebrew is completely different, but in the Masoretic Hebrew, it literally says Pirei, which is a wild, and Adam, man. It's a wild Adam, a wild man. And I have to ask a question: what is it with? Because Esau was a hairy fellow too, and I've heard the arguments before that he too was basically a wild man. And what is it with Abraham's children and grandchildren that they became hairy fellows or wild men? I don't know. That's just that's strange. All right, this was interesting here in verse 13. It says, and she gave thanks before Yahuwah, whose words spake to her. So that seems to be identifying here. It seems like the word is completely different from Yahuwah here. Okay, so she gave thanks before Yahuwah, whose word. Why not just state she gave thanks before Yahuwah, who spoke with her? The word would be a given, right? But it seems to be saying that the word is separate from Yahuwah. And then we see the glory of the Shekinah, and it seems to be kind of a, I don't know, like you see all three at play there. You see the Father, you see the Son, you see the Ruach HaKodesh. That's about as much as I have on that there. Okay, so Hagar, she agrees to come back, and obviously she told Abram about the name of the child, and he went through with it, which is interesting because notice it says that he named his son Ishmael, but he wasn't a part of that conversation. We don't know if Yahuwah came and spoke to him separately, but apparently she came back and gave the conversation. So imagine the conversation Hagar would have had with Sarah and Abram after her return. She might have said something like this: I fled from you all because I was so miserable and thought I could not continue here. But Yahuwah met me and told me he would see me through. He told me to come back and submit to you, so that is why I'm here. Maybe she did so grudgingly, we don't really know. But she came back, she submitted. And I just want to point this out, that in closure, that if you're in a difficult situation like this, if you have to submit in difficult circumstances, Yahuwah sees it. If you ache under the pain of your ministry, Yahuwah sees it. And there are times if you feel like running, Yahuwah sees that too. So obviously she ran, and Yahuwah intervened in the wilderness, at least through this angel of Yahuwah and through the word, and told her to come back, and she submitted to that. And so take that for what it is. I'm going to close this chapter. The next one I have tons of notes on. It's going to get really good. And I'm handing it back to you, Michael. Go ahead and finish the chapter.
All right, and then I'll read 17 for you, and then you can get first commentary.
Please do.
So I have to talk about Shekinah a little bit, and then a little bit on 14. So 13, it says, actually, I'm not even going to read KJV, but Palestinian says, and she gave thanks before the Lord, whose word spake to her, and thus said, Thou art he who livest, and art eternal, seest, but art not seen. For she said, for behold, here is revealed the glory of the Shekinah, the Lord after a vision. Before I get into Shekinah, a little bit more on Hagar. So Hagar, slave woman, right? Not the promised seed. So Hagar is one of the only women in Genesis to talk to God, and she is the only person in Genesis to give God a name. She calls God El Roy, or God of seeing, when she sees a vision near a well that she will give birth to a son. So just think about that. She gives God a name, and I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Okay, so Shekinah, you know how to talk about it. So Shekinah is not found in Scripture, but the root word means to settle, inhabit, or dwell. So in the verb form, it is often used to refer to the dwelling of a person or animal in a place, or to the dwelling of God. So nouns derive from the root and called shaken, Shachen, which equals neighbor, and mishkan, a dwelling place, whether a regular home or a holy site such as the tabernacle. Okay, I'm gonna post this so you guys can see that if this interests you. Let's see. According to the Targums, Shekinah appeared between two golden angels. It was the Shekinah that had appeared as a cloud on Mount Sinai and spoke to Moses. It was by her hand that the stone tablets of the covenant were written. She had been a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night that had led the Israelites through the wilderness. Sarai talks about that as well as far as wisdom. The Shekinah had fed them, guided them, and taught them. So I just want to add that. And then real quick on number 14, it says, wherefore the well was called Bir, and I'll butcher this, Bir Laha Roy. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Bir Laha Roy means the well of the living one who sees me, or the one who reveals himself. And a little note, Isaac lived in the vicinity of this well as well in Genesis 24. Genesis 24 and 25. That's what I got for 16. I will read 17 and then hand off to Noel. So let's get going here. 17, Palestinian Targum, verse 1. It says, and Abram was the son of 99 years, and the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai, serve before me, and be perfect in thy flesh. And I will set my covenant between my word and thee, and I will multiply thee very greatly. And because Abraham was not circumcised, he was not able to stand, but he bowed himself upon his face. And the Lord spake with him, saying, behold, I have confirmed, or divided my covenant with thee, and thou shalt be my father of many peoples. And thy name should be called no more Abram, but Abraham shall be thy name, because to be the father of a great multitudes of people I have appointed thee. And I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will set thee for congregations, and kings ruling over peoples shall come forth from thee. And I have established my covenant between my word and thee, and thy sons after thee in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God to thee and to thy sons after thee. And I will give to thee and to thy sons after thee the land of thy habitation, and all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be to them Eloha. And the Lord said to Abraham, and thou shalt observe my covenant, thou and thy sons after thee in their generations. This is my covenant that you shall observe between my word and you, and your sons after you, every male of you being circumcised, though he have not a father to circumcise him. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin as a sign of the covenant between my word and you. And the son of 8 days shall be circumcised among you, every male in your generations, from him who is brought up in your house, or bought with your silver, unto every son of the peoples who is not of you. He who is circumcised shall circumcise him who is brought up among you, and bought with your silver. And it shall be my covenant in your flesh for a covenant forever. And the uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, unless he have someone to circumcise him, that man shall be cut off from his people. He hath made my covenant to pass away. And the Lord said to Abram, the name of Sarah thy wife shall no more be called Sarah, for Sarah shall be her name with an H. And I will bless her in her body, and will also give her a son to thee, and I will bless them, and he shall be for assemblies, and kings ruling over nations shall be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and wondered, and said in his heart, shall the son of 100 years have progeny, and Sarah the daughter of 90 years bear a child? Abraham said before the Lord, may not Ishmael be established and serve before thee? And the Lord said, in truth, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishak. With him I will confirm my covenant for an everlasting covenant to his sons after him. Concerning Ishmael, I have heard thy prayer. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will spread him abroad, and multiply him greatly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will give him to be a great people. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to thee at this time in the year after. And he ceased speaking with them, and the glory of the Lord ascended from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son and brought him into the house, and bought with money every male among the household people of Abraham. And he circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the same day in which the Lord spake with him. And Abraham was the son of 90 and 9 years when he circumcised the flesh of his foreskin. And the same day in the 14th year was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son. And every man of his house, the house trained, and purchased with money of the sons of the people, were circumcised with them. And enough to know for a commentary on 17.
All right, Michael, if I am stepping on any toes here or stealing thunder, I apologize. I'm going to be speaking on the Amy Grant song, El Shaddai. And there's some phenomenal things I found in here. And maybe I won't cover everything. Maybe there's some things you found and that you can add to this. So let me just read verse 1 again, because I'm going to be dealing exclusively with this verse for the next so many minutes. And Abram was the son of 90 and 9 years, and Yahuwah appeared to Abram. So think of the word appeared, and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Serve before me and be perfect in thy flesh. Isn't that interesting? Be perfect in thy flesh. So let's look at the word here first, appeared. All right, we're dealing with the time jump because we've just jumped ahead some 13 years by my math. Okay, he's 99 years old now, and Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He was 86 years old when the son Ishmael was born of Hagar. We're not told that he had any words from the Most High then. If he did, they're not recorded. And he had waited some 25 years for the fulfillment of Elohim's promise to give a son through Sarai. 25 years, that's a long time. It had been some 13 years since his last recorded word from Elohim. Now, maybe in other texts, there might be more in there, but we don't get that here in Genesis. It says Yahuwah appeared to Abram. And unlike the appearance with Hagar, it doesn't say an angel of Yahuwah. And so I'd like to think that there's something more to it, that it's not just a voice speaking to him. It's not just something he hears internally, that there's actually some sort of physical appearing here, maybe similar to what Moshe saw on the mountaintop. I don't really know. I'll leave it for you guys to decide on that. Now, he says here, I am El Shaddai. Now, this is where it really gets good. The name Shaddai appears 48 times in the Masoretic. I did not do a count on the Targum. I couldn't tell you. Maybe more. I don't know. 7 of those times as El Shaddai. 5 times in Genesis, once in Exodus, and once in Ezekiel. The first occurrence of the name is in Genesis 17:1, which we just read. This is the first occurrence. However, I did find an earlier depiction in the book of Jasher, and it says this. This is really fascinating. This is the passage where Zillah is forced to drink a concoction that will make her barren. All right. And this is leading up to the flood account. And some of the sons of men caused their wives to drink a draught that would render them barren, in order that they might retain their figures, their supermodel bodies, I guess, and whereby their beautiful appearance might not fade until age faded them. But you guys get the drift there. And when the sons of men caused some of their wives to drink, Zillah drank with them. And the childbearing woman appeared abominable in the sight of their husbands as widows, while their husbands lived. For to the barren ones only they were attracted or attached. And in the end of days and years, when Zillah became old, Yahuwah opened her womb. So even though she did this, you talk about birth control. This isn't just like a one time. Like, this is like you take it, whatever this was, and they flip the switch in your body. You're not giving birth anymore. So Zillah, I guess, looked beautiful, and she's old now. She has no children. Yahuwah opens her womb. Keep in mind, I've done a study on this. I believe Zillah is the grandmother of Ham. All right. Zillah is a child of Cain. Why is Moses and the writer of Jasher taking all this time to write about Zillah and Tubal Cain and Lamech, this family dynamic? It's a family. If they're just a child of Cain, they were destroying the flood. I thought their line came to an end. What's the importance of all this? Well, okay, Zillah gives birth to Naamah. Why is Naamah important? I actually believe that Enoch adopted Naamah, and she was actually hundreds of years older than Noah. She was very old. And she conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Tubal Cain, saying, "After I had withered away, have I obtained him from the Almighty Elohim." And the actual wording is El Shaddai. So she is, interestingly enough, the first in recorded scripture that I can find, if you count Jasher scripture, to say El Shaddai. That's fascinating. What this tells us is that El Shaddai was always intended to be Yahuwah, not some other Canaanite Elohim. And it makes sense. The Canaanites of Abraham's day were basing their El on a corruption of Shem's religion. I say this time and time and time again. As you do a word study on El Shaddai, you find that El Shaddai is not unique to the Bible. It was all through that region, and there was a Elohim named El, and of course, they would all call their gods Elohim, and Shaddai, and so on and so forth. Well, I'll say this again because this needs repeated. If you are Noah and Shem, and you get off the ark and you go to the land of Canaan, and you live there for the rest of your days, and you're Shem and Noah of all people, like you're the forefather of everybody on the earth. It seems to me like your language and your religion is going to rub off on the locals. Just either you believe it or you don't. So when people say that the Bible is a ripoff of the Canaanite religion, I like to say, reverse that. So this is where it gets really interesting. In the vision of Balaam, and this is what excites me about how accurate the Bible is as a historical text. In the vision of Balaam, recorded in the book of Numbers, chapter 24, and also chapter 24, the vision comes from Shaddai. Okay, same word, Shaddai, who is also referred to as El and Elyon, Most High. So there's something that it's called the inscriptions at Deir Allah. Okay, and this inscription is let's see. Let me read Wikipedia's description of this right here. The Deir Allah inscription was discovered during a 1967 excavation in the Deir Allah wilderness desert of Jordan, right? Country of Jordan, just to the east of Israel. It is currently at this inscription, the Deir Allah inscription, is currently at the Jordan Archaeological Museum, if you needed to know that information. The excavation in 1967 revealed a multi-chamber structure that had been destroyed by an earthquake during the Persian period. On the wall, that's according to official history and all that. I don't know how they piece all that together, but whatever. On the wall of which was written a story relating visions of Balaam, son of Beor. Okay, so the same Balaam from the story in Numbers, he was a famous prophet around those parts, and they found his story on a wall, which they preserved. And I'm going to read you some of that story because it gets really interesting. It says that he was a seer of the Elohim, plural. All right. So here's what we learned from it in a nutshell. Balaam's Elohim is associated with Ashtar, which is the same as Ashtoreth or Ishtar, where we get Easter, right? So he ultimately worshipped Ishtar. And another one was an Elohim named SHGR. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but the other is Shaddai, which so it's very close to Shaddai. All right. There's more than, but Shaddai actually is plural. Okay, it means Elohims and if you want to call them Elohim Esses, or the Mrs. Elohims, Fräulein Elohim. And this is where it gets exciting, because according to Balaam, there's more than one Shaddai. There is a Most High Shaddai, but there is also a council of Shaddai. This is so important to the entire narrative, all right? When somebody comes and tells you El Shaddai is a pagan Canaanite entity, in fact, the name Shaddai is often used in parallel to El later in the book of Job. All right, so according in the book of Job, you see him referring to Shaddai as Elohim. That was a popular in that region at that time to refer to Elohim in this way. All right. It also features the word. Let's see. Okay, I don't need to go there. Okay, so let me go through some of this really quickly. And I don't know if I'll read the whole thing, but this is some of the transcript that is apparently written by Balaam, or about Balaam, written by one of his scribes or whatever. This is the inscription of Balaam, son of Beor. He was a divine seer, and the Elohim, plural, came to him at night, and they spoke to him according to the vision of El. And they said to Balaam, son of Beor, this will, I wish I could show you, there's a lot of dots in here. This will the ... do in the future. No man has seen what you have heard. And Balaam rose on the morrow, and he wept. And his people came to him, and they said to Balaam, son of Beor, why do you fast? Why do you weep? And he said to them, be seated, and I will show you what the Shaddaiim, there it is again, have done. And go, behold, the workings of the Elohim. The Elohim have joined forces, and the Shaddaiim have established a council. He's talking about the divine council of heaven. And they have said to Ishtar, sew up and cover the heavens in dense clouds, so that darkness and not brilliance will be the concealment, and not bristling light, that you may still dread darkness and never raise your voice again. Let's see. And I could go on in there, but it's basically not, he's in despair because he worships Ishtar, and the divine council have gotten together, and it's not looking so good for Ishtar. So I don't know. I find that really fascinating. It's actually crediting Ishtar to be a real Elohim, and she's not the top Elohim. Like, there's a council in heaven. They can roll out a judgment on these different Elohim, and they have to follow through with it. I mean, think about the connotations of that. It seems like a lot of these people recognized that they didn't want to worship the top guy, top Elohim, the Most High. They would rather worship the Elohim below him. And this goes back into Psalm 82, where the divine council, Yahuwah criticizes them for not teaching his Torah, right? That's why the sons of Ishmael, the sons of Esau, the sons of Yasharel, they all rejected Yahuwah because they didn't want his Torah. They would have rather worshipped any of the other Elohim in his council, Ishtar, any of them, because they didn't push his Torah. All right, so now let's look at some of the meanings of El Shaddai. And there's a lot of meaning in this. Shaddai is related to wilderness or mountains. All right. So El Shaddai means, it could mean Elohim of the wilderness, and originally would not have okay. Let's see. Another one could be, another theory is that Shaddai is a derivative of Shadu, meaning mountain, and Shadua, meaning mountain dweller. So that's kind of interesting. The term El Shaddai may mean Elohim of the mountains, referring to the Mesopotamian divine mountain. This could also refer to the Israelite camp stay at Sinai. All right. Here's another one that you'll hear a lot about is Shaddai. Well, Michael, maybe I should let you go over this. Well, I'll go and finish this because I don't think you're going to cover all this. The other one you're going to hear a lot about is Shaddai could possibly mean destroyer. The root word Shaddad means to plunder, overpower, or make desolate. This would give Shaddai the meaning of destroyer, representing one of the aspects of Elohim. And the thing is that people will present this to me, like they're dropping truth in my lap. They're like, El Shaddai means the destroyer. And I'm like, okay, what's your point? And they're like, well, that's not the God of the Bible. I'm like, yes, it is. It's in there. That's the God of the Bible. It's one of his character traits. And they're like, well, my God would never, he would never destroy. Like, what are you talking about? Like the creation account, like he destroys the world and he recreates. Then there's a flood. He destroys the world with the flood. He is El Shaddai, the destroyer. And then he destroys the world again, and at the beginning of the millennial kingdom, and here I think we are in the short season, he's going to destroy it again. He's going to destroy the whole world. He is the destroyer. So nobody else is the destroyer. He is the destroyer, El Shaddai. All right. Here's another interesting meaning to Shaddai. So I'm asking for a mature audience here. It could mean breast. You heard me right. So the root shad means breast. Of the six, and this is kind of interesting because of the 6 times that the name El Shaddai appears in the book of Genesis, 5 are in connection with fertility blessings for the patriarchs. The original understanding of Shaddai as related to fertility, it may be used differently by Isaiah, Joel, and Job, who go with the more all-powerful Almighty. All right. So, before I get to that, okay, let's see. I have some other stuff here, but all right, so let's talk about breast here because the Hebrew word shad means chest or breast. It may have in mind the strength of a man's chest or the comfort and nourishment of a woman's breast. All right, so on breast. This is kind of interesting because if El Shaddai is the character of Yahuwah, and it could mean, of the mountains, it could mean to display power or all powerful. It could mean the destroyer, but it could mean the nourishment and comfort that he provides on his bosom. All right. And this is what we read in Odes of Solomon, chapter 19. And the Ruach HaKodesh milked him. Who did he milk? Because his, Yahuwah's, breasts were full, and it was necessary for him that his milk should be sufficiently released. And the Ruach HaKodesh opened his bosom and mingled the milk from the 2 breasts of the Father and gave the mixture to the world without their knowing. And they who receive in its fullness are the ones on the right hand. Odes of Solomon, chapter 19. All right. So this has been, if you do a search on Yahuwah or God or the Father having breast, this passage is going to come up. All right. It is what it is. And then the other one, the other controversial one, comes from Revelation 1:13. And it says in the Greek, and I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps. The Greek word is mastos, paps, with a golden girdle. All right. So let's analyze this the best we can. All right. Yahusha is described as having paps with a golden girdle. But what are paps? According to the Oxford Dictionary, it basically means breast. All right. There is evidence to show that paps exclusively refers to woman's breast. Now, I looked at the Hebrew Revelation. It doesn't really exclusively say that. It seemed to be kind of missing. I don't know if it was on the translation. I don't really know. I can't know all that's going on in the Hebrew. All right. So so let's see here. So mastos. So mastos specifically, it tends to mean the breast of a woman. It could mean the nipples of a man. It could mean that. So it could be talking about his nipples. But the word paps could refer to both male and female breasts. But the New Testament applies the Greek word mastos to women only in all other cases. So I'll give you some examples. This comes from Luke 11:27. And it came to pass as he spoke these things, a certain woman of the company lifted up her voice and said unto him, Blessed is the womb that bare thee, and the paps, the mastos, which thou hast sucked. So the breast of a woman which thou hast sucked. And then in Luke 23:29, we read, For behold, the days are coming, in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bare, and the paps, mastos, or the breast of a woman which never gave suck. All right, so that's just for your consideration. All the different ways we could look at El Shaddai. I'm not saying what the right answer is. Maybe it's all of them. I mean, that's one of the incredible things about the Hebrew language is that there's so much there, and I would imagine the Paleo Hebrew there's even more. Um, so a few more notes on verse 1 before I hand it back to Michael. He says, "Walk before me and be blameless." So after the proclamation of his name, El Shaddai, Elohim tells Abram what is expected of him. The word blameless literally means whole. Okay. Yahuwah wanted all of Abram, a total commitment. And it's like for all the hyper grace people out there, all the people that are proclaiming that the law has been done away with, it's like they're just making excuses for the fact that they don't want to give the whole of themselves to Yahuwah. Because if they did, what would be the problem? What would be the problem of conforming to his will, to his law, to his instructions in righteous living? I mean, I just hear excuse after excuse after excuse. And I think to the point that, like, hopefully some of those people, get it, that they're just making it's just excuses. That's all it is. All right. I will make my covenant between me and you. So Elohim also reminds Abram that he has not forgotten the covenant. The covenant was made 25 years earlier. Okay. 25 years have passed since the promise was first made. And though it may have seemed to Abram like Elohim forgot, Elohim didn't forget anything. And when we're reading through these chapters, if you sit in this in one seating and you go through like chapter 12 through like 17, you're like, why does Yahuwah keep bringing this up over and over again about his covenant? It's because so many years are going past, and Abram's like, I know you keep telling me this, but none of this is happening, and I'm going to die soon. So it's just Yahuwah constantly reminding him, like, you need to be faithful. You need to believe. I'm going to do this. So handing it back to you, Michael.
So at first it was drizzling, and then it just monsooned, and I think we found some similar studies because I had a lot of the same thing. Okay, so I'll just speed read some of that, so it won't be as repetitive. But Abram was 99 years old and 9. Yeah, I guess 90 years old and 9. The Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, or El Shaddai. Walk before me and be thou perfect. So walk before me and be thou perfect echoes that of Genesis 6:9. Noah was a righteous man. Noah walked with God. So, but a commentary, which I thought was interesting, let me know what you guys think, compared the two individuals to a king who had two sons. One was grown up and the other was a child. The king asked the child to walk with him, Noah, but the king asked the adult to walk before him, Abraham. What do you guys think about that? Similarly, Genesis 40:15 says, and he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk. So just a slight difference. Walked with God or walked before him. What do you guys make about that slight difference? So some El Shaddai examples in the Old Testament. So the prophet Balaam, I think Noel mentioned that, addressed the Lord as Shaddai. Job knew God by the same title. Naomi in the book of Ruth said El Shaddai, and the title Shaddai is also found in Psalms, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Joel. Okay, so the literal meaning of Shaddai is disputed, as Noel kind of went with, and he must have found some similar articles because I found the same thing. That was destroyer, and that's what Pam was saying in the chat, that it could mean some kind of destroyer, devour, plunder, overpower, to make desolate. I also found that it could be God of the mountain, God of the mountainous wilderness. I did find the breast and the womb as well. But what I did find on that was so of the 6 times that the name El Shaddai appears in the book of Genesis, I don't think Noel mentioned this part, 5 of the 6 are in connection with fertility blessings for the patriarchs. So that kind of gives credence to the breast womb part for El Shaddai. What do you guys make about that? And this is the popular one, I think. Modern scholars easily identify El as the Hebrew for God. We know that. But there is less agreement on the meaning of Shaddai. The Hebrew root, SDD, may be referring to the powerful, strong one. Se and De is the one who suffices. So the concept seems to be he who can accomplish anything without limits. That's another meaning of the El Shaddai. Okay, so the Hebrew adverb in tanim means complete. So that's the same thing as be perfect, I believe. Tanim. Now I found this was interesting. It refers to animals which are without blemish and is also translated as such relative adjectives as full, whole, upright, and perfect. So this is what Abraham is supposed to be. In the New Testament, same command Yeshua gives his apostles in Matthew 4:48. Be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. So in the Gospels, the Greek word teleos, or perfect, occurs only 3 times, twice in that Matthew passage, and then the third time in Matthew 19:21, where Yeshua tells the rich young ruler to go and sell what he has and give it to the poor if he wants to be perfect. So these are just the same commands, nothing new under the sun. What Abraham is supposed to do, what let's see, his apostles are supposed to do, and then the rich man, just be perfect, without blemish. I think Noel only stopped at 1, so I'll hand it back to him.
I've got to be prepared here. All right. So what do I got here? Ended there. And this was interesting. Well, Michael, since just so I don't trudge on anything more, because I gave a lot, I did a lot there in verse 1. Do you want to go ahead and speak on 2, 3, and 4, whatever, and then I'll jump in and cover whatever you don't get?
Sure, it'll be quick. I don't have too much on those, but yeah, I can do that. So number 2, it says, "And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly." So I found this was interesting. Obviously, I haven't done a deep study on that, but I love how this is saying the Abrahamic covenant was foundational to additional covenants in the Bible. So the promised land of the Palestinian covenant in Deuteronomy 30 is reliant upon the Abrahamic covenant. Promise of the kingly descendants in the Davidic covenant is reliant on the Abraham covenant. And then finally, the promise of blessing in the Old and New covenants, there's our famous Jeremiah 31, Exodus 19, is also reliant on the Abrahamic covenant. So I thought that was cool that it's somewhat of a foundational covenant to other covenants. Number 4, "And as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations." And so, image for you, kind of a between Genesis 6 and Genesis 17. So Genesis 6, the Noah, "For my part, I'm going to send the flood, the waters and earth, to destroy all living things. But with you, I shall establish my covenant." So Genesis 17:4, "For my part, this is my covenant, and with you, you will become the father of many nations." And then Noah, "And you will go aboard the ark. From all living things, you must take 2 pairs of each kind. They must be male and female. For your part, provide yourself with eatables of all kinds." Noah did this exactly as God commanded. And then the rest of the chapter, I guess in 17, they're kind of summarizing it. "You, for your part, must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you. You must circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, every one of your males, generation after generation. All the men of his household were circumcised with him." So I thought that was interesting. Let's see. Other sections kind of separated in 7 parts of the Abrahamic covenant. We talked about it last time, but kind of rehash it. So he'll be a father of many nations. His new name will be Abraham. He will be exceedingly fertile. Nations will descend from his line. Descendants will be kings. Perpetual covenant to include his descendants, and not just him. The entire land of Canaan will belong to him and his descendants. So that's kind of a summary of that. I'll do one more and then hand it back. Number 5. Let's see. So KJV says, "Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but by thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee." So another commentary that I thought was interesting. So in many parts of the ancient world, there are accounts of men receiving new names in place of their former designations. So this act of renaming often occurred at a time of transition in the life of the one renamed, and frequently carried with it privileges and honors for the one receiving the new name. However, the person who gave the new name was usually in a position of authority and could exercise power and dominion over that individual. Renaming can also indicate a kind of adoption into the household, which is equivalent to conferring on them a high honor. This adoption would carry with it the idea of responsibility as well as inheritance. So that was cool, and it definitely summarizes us being grafted into this new household, our family. And Yeshua got a new name, right? And I wonder if we get new names. I think he got a new name. I don't know. I'm getting confused there. But And finally, just other examples of name changes. 32, God changes Jacob's name to Israel, which means God fights or fights with God. In 2 Samuel 12, God names Solomon Jedediah, which means loved by the Lord. Solomon never goes by that name, so it was apparently private, I guess. Famously, Yeshua gives Simon the name Peter, which means a stone. This is a nickname rather than a rename. And don't forget Saul, everybody's favorite on the server, which can mean death. Came to be known as Paul, which can mean little. I don't know if God gave a new name or if that was simply cultural. I will stop there and hand it back to Noel. I went through 5.
All right, good. So I think one of the things you kind of passed over was the explanation for why in verse 3 he's on his face before Yahuwah. It says, verse 3, and because Abram was not circumcised, he was not able to stand. Well, that's kind of interesting. I feel like we're kind of getting a glimpse into just the feelings of the uncircumcised in the Targum time period. And I was kind of thinking about this and go, okay, he wasn't circumcised yet, so he wasn't able to stand in his presence versus maybe someone who was. Well, let's see what else we read about this in scripture. This comes from, there are restrictions in the Torah among non-circumcised, especially at Passover. And this comes from Exodus chapter 12. So this is before they even get into Mount Sinai. They're still in Egypt at this point. This is the first Passover. And Yahuwah said unto Moshe and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof. But every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. So this is what's right here. It's defining. It's like, well, who's a stranger? Well, the uncircumcised. It means that they are they do not have a sign of the covenant. Someone might say, well, I am in the covenant, but then you have to ask the question, does Yahuwah know that? Because according to him, if you're not circumcised, you have no sign of being in the covenant, and you are a stranger. All right, keep reading. A foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof. In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall you break a bone thereof. So that's a side note to what we're talking about here. Don't need to go through all those directions. All the congregation of Yasharel shall keep it. Okay, so the whole congregation, right? If you are in a covenant with Yahuwah, right? And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to Yahuwah, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. So only if you're circumcised can you come near and keep it. You can get angry with me. These aren't my words. All right. These are Yahuwah's instructions. And he shall be as one that is born in the land. Wow, that's interesting. So it just defined a stranger coming. If they are circumcised, they are no longer a stranger. They can come near, and it is as if they were born in the land. That's really interesting. So if you're circumcised in the covenant, it is as if you were born in the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. That's pretty straightforward. No uncircumcised person shall eat the Passover. One law shall be to him. One Torah shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. All right. So if anyone's using an excuse, but I'm not a Jew, well, okay, fine. You weren't homeborn. You're a sojourner. It's still the same Torah. It applies to everyone. All right. Now, I have heard people having contention with this passage among Torah folk. Like if you when people, what happens is that when people come into the Torah community and they're like, I want to be a part of the covenants, I want to love the Father, this kind of stuff, and then they come into it and they're like, I don't like these laws, these instructions and righteous living. I don't like the Father. I don't, they won't admit they don't like the Father, but that's what it comes down to. And they'll leave the community and they'll start doing hit pieces. And I remember I was watching one video and they brought this up. Some woman said, that the Torah community, they were perverted because we wanted to go to a Passover dinner and they asked my husband if he was circumcised. And it's like her contention was, she was claiming it was with these like perverted people. No, the contention she was having with the Father, it was a clear command. Right? He was the one that spoke it. He is speaking as an instruction to all of his children that if you are going to have people come in and have a Passover meal with you, that they are to be circumcised. It's pretty straightforward, right? And I thought it was just interesting there I didn't really want to get into the whole circumcision debates, go off and off and off on it, but it's just interesting there to see a passage where they're explaining that he had a certain posture in front of the Father because he wasn't. Now, there's one more that I want to turn to. Maybe I'll wait on that. Let's just cover what Michael covered here. It says, no longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. And Michael talked about this a little bit, but it's really interesting here because let's see. Oh, I had notes on it. What did it mean? Okay. So the name change is interesting timing because we see in this chapter that Abram was really struggling with his faith. And, it's been 25 years. Where's this child you promised? We're trying everything we can. Nothing's working. I thought it was going to be with Hagar and Ishmael. You're saying it's not. So what gives? Sarah's an old woman. It's not going to happen with her. And so why the name change? One of the suggestions is that it was to encourage his faith, but also to declare the authority that El had to do what he said he would. I'm going to change your name, and I'm going to do what I said I would, making him the father of. So Abram basically means the father of many. All right. Now, he was the father of many. If you guys know my point of view, he already had several wives, and he had like 50 daughters. He was the father of many. But the name change, Yahuwah said, you might be struggling with this, but just to assure you that I have every intention of going through this, I am changing your name to the father of many nations. Now, pause and consider the ramifications of this. Abram would then have to go and announce his name change to everyone around him, say, this isn't a midlife crisis, I promise you, but Yahuwah really told me, and you're going to call me the father of many nations now. And everyone's got to be thinking like, dude, you've lost it, man. Like, like you're really desperate. You're really reaching. Maybe you need to take up a side hobby like golf or something, yeah. And the same thing, of course, with Sarai, right? She's named Sarah, and it's let's see. I had notes here on what it was. Maybe I'll get to it a little bit lower down. And that's okay. And let's cover one more thing. So this comes from the writings of Abraham. I've quoted from this before. I love this passage. And it's a bit lengthy, but it's worth it to go through this. And I have stated time and again that Yahuwah's Torah is eternal. It did not begin at Sinai. People come to me all the time and they're like, no, like the Torah was introduced at Sinai, and that's proof I don't have to keep it. And I'm like, first of all, so what if it was, if it only came about at Torah? It still came, at Sinai, it still came about at Sinai. Just because it was at one point and not at another doesn't mean you can't keep it anymore. It's almost like anyone who's married, it's like, there was a time I didn't make a vow to my wife, so I don't have to keep a vow anymore. And it's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But the thing is that, you bring up like, well, what about murder? What about adultery? What about all the evil people at Sodom and Gomorrah before the flood? Idolatry. What about Cain killing his brother Abel? Like, that's breaking the law. And they'll say, oh, that's the 10 Commandments. Well, guess what? The 10 Commandments was introduced at Sinai too. It wasn't introduced beforehand. So now we've got problems because there's no morality that they're being judged by. So again, just to point out that the Torah has always been here from the very beginning. Adam was instructed in it. Enoch was instructed in it. And I was actually reading some interesting passages on that in Jasher today, that Enoch was instructing them in Yahuwah's instructions in righteous living. That was really exciting to read. All right, this is what it reads, says in the writings of Abraham. And this is the same scene that basically plays out right here. It says, at the end of 13 years, Yahuwah appeared unto me, and he said unto me, Abraham, because thou hast been faithful in all things unto me from the time thou wast 3 years old, and behold, now thou art 90 and 9. So we see it's the same year. He's 99 years old. 13 years have passed. Therefore, I will establish my covenant with thee, for with thee I shall commence a new dispensation. There's that word dispensation. I'd like to see what the original word is on that. Whatever translator decided to throw that in there. I really don't believe that the original text said dispensation. That's such a big, meaty, modern word. I shall commence a new dispensation of the gospel, that from this time forth all those who would be sealed unto me must be sealed unto thee. Okay, he's talking about circumcision. Wherefore I will send Noah unto thee in the tabernacle, and he will bestow upon thee the keys of the priesthood. Trippy little fact here, Noah was already dead by this point. All right, officially speaking. By any timeline. But Noah is living in paradise, and he's not in Sheol. And he's coming to bestow thee the keys of the priesthood. For the city of Melchizedek will I take up from off the earth, and there will be a new beginning in thee. So he's removing, he's going to remove Shem, he's going to remove Noah. It's just Abraham now. That's what he means by the new dispensation. For I will greatly multiply thy seed, and I will make them my ministers, that through thy priesthood all the peoples of the earth shall be blessed. Therefore, from this time forth shall every male child among you be circumcised, and that his foreskin shall be opened in token of the opening of his heart to the light of the gospel. So it's basically saying that the outer physical foreskin is a mark of what we should be having in our heart, that our hearts should be circumcised. And that's what Paul talks about in Romans. And on the 8th day shall ye do it, that ye may remember that on the 8th day they shall be baptized, that the blessing of the gospel may come upon them. This is according to the covenant I made with Adam in the Garden of Eden. But I instructed, so pay attention to this. So he's saying, look, I instructed Adam to circumcise. He circumcised his sons on the 8th day, but I instructed Noah and Shem not to administer this covenant unto thee, that thou might receive it in token of this new covenant which I make with thee. So what Yahuwah did is he instructed Noah and Shem to teach Abraham the Torah, but they left out the circumcision part, because Yahuwah wanted to personally teach it to him as part of the covenant. Although I gave these ordinances in the beginning to Adam, yet the sons of men have continually gone astray from my precepts, and have not kept my ordinances, which I gave unto their fathers. They have neglected the ordinances of baptism, which I commanded unto them, in token of the burial of the natural man, and have ceased to receive the anointing whereby they became kings and priests unto me. And it goes on and on from there. And I've quoted from this a lot about baptism, and it talks about how they started baptizing children, which is what, the Catholic Church does, the Lutheran Church. A lot of people, they baptize children, and Yahuwah is very much against that. But anyways, that's that passage there. And I don't have a lot more on this chapter. I'm going to hand it back to you, Michael.
All right. I think you went to 12, but it sounds like you don't have too much. So we'll see where I get before I hand it back. Number 6, and I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make a nation of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. So, and if you read up till 8, 17:6 through 17:8, I want to post something here I thought was cool. So it says, notice the first 2 words of 17:6. It says, I will, or in the KJV it says, and I will. These words occur 5 times in the next 3 verses, so 6, 7, and 8. And look at the summary here. So I will make you exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come forth from you. I will. This is Yahuwah, or Oh, I'll establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants. I will give you your descendants in the land. I'll be their God. So that's kind of cool that it's just he's taking control of this covenant part and saying I will a bunch of times in just 3 sentences. Number 8 says, and I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger. So word study, let's see. I will post what I'm reading here. So Genesis 28, Isaac calls Jacob and blessed him and commanded him, saying, you shall not take away from the daughters of Canaan. I guess it continues. I'll read. So may God do and make you fruitful and multiply you, so that you may become a multitude of people. May he also give you the blessing of Abraham. There's a tie-in to you and to your descendants, so that you may possess the land where you live as a stranger. And that word, where you live as a stranger, is wherein thou art a stranger. So it was kind of foreshadowing this prophecy, I guess. Thy seed will be a stranger in a land, and that's what Isaac had to do as well. Isaac called Jacob and blessed him. So I thought that was cool. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit about circumcision. The Palestinian said, number 10, this is my covenant that you shall observe between my word and you and your sons after you, every male of you being circumcised. And Rosalind said it, and so I want to talk also about the circumcision of the heart a little bit. These are just some verses. So in Leviticus, Yah talks about Israel's future treachery and hostility towards them, using the term uncircumcised hearts. Circumcision of the heart is mentioned in Deuteronomy, where the Israelites are told to circumcise the foreskins of their hearts. Deuteronomy 30 promises that the Lord will circumcise the Israelites' hearts so that they will love him. In both cases, circumcision of the heart brings about proper attitude. Let's see. So in the Septuagint, the word for circumcision can mean like purity. So this connects circumcision with purification. In Jeremiah 4, Judah and Jerusalem are warned to circumcise the foreskins of their hearts in order to avoid God's wrath. In Jeremiah 29 or 25 and 26, chapter 9, he warns that he will call to account all who are circumcised in the foreskin. And the next chapter says that the Israelites are uncircumcised in their heart. This suggests that they must do more than just circumcise their foreskin, which is what Romans 2 says as well. So circumcision in the New Testament, real quick. Both John the Baptist and Yeshua circumcised on the 8th day. Acts mentions that Isaac was circumcised on the 8th day. Paul identifies his own circumcision. Stephen angered his enemies by calling them stiff-necked people with uncircumcised hearts and ears. Paul wrote, and this is what the Romans passage is, a man is a Jew if he is one inwardly, and circumcision is of circumcision of the heart. So there's just some extra stuff there. But Maccabees, I was looking into Maccabees, and that's more of a physical circumcision, so I'll share that outside the canon. So in 1 Maccabees 1:15, Jews who made themselves uncircumcised and abandoned the Holy Covenant are associated with evil actions. Later in the same chapter, the author describes the historical event of desecrating the temple in Jerusalem during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. In the next verses, Greek officials are said to have killed anyone who circumcised their children. Event retold in 4th Maccabees. So these versions show the contention with Greek society, which shunned circumcision, and the Jews who turned from the Torah. So just kind of an additional context there. 14, 15, 16, 17, 20. I know he's going to talk about the sons probably. So let me go there. I'll go up until the sons and then give it back to him, and then we'll probably close. Where am I? So 14. So these are a lot. So I'm going to summarize these. So in the circumcised man, child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. So I'm just going to post all the words from his people, and then too long there. Okay, so let me just do some of them. Give me a second with me. That's the first few. I'm not going to read all of it, but for context, Leviticus 7 and 19 are talking about the same word and how you can be cut off from his people. So in this instance, in 14, Genesis 14, it says, the uncircumcised man, child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. So obviously circumcision is important. But here's other ways you can be cut off from his people. And I've only found that because of this word study. So, but the person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings, when he is unclean, that person should be cut off. If you eat the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings, well, anyone touches anything unclean, whether human uncleanness or an unclean animal, or any unclean detestable thing, they should be cut off from his people. So whoever eats the fat of the animal, which an offering by fire is offered by the Lord, the person who eats it shall also be cut off. Any person who eats any blood of any animal, that will be cut off from his people. Leviticus 19 says, anyone who eats it will bear the consequences. This is talking about the peace offering. So if you eat, let's see. So if you eat the peace offering on the third day, it is unclean. It will not be accepted. Anyone who eats of this will be cut off from his people. So, and I have a few more. I guess I'll put it out. I guess I won't go over it, but I'll just add it if you guys want to read along. But these are, when we were talking about, it won't let me. We're talking about like what Sodom and Gomorrah, how it was way more than just sexuality. This is kind of the same thing. It's saying these are the many ways you could be cut off from his people, including circumcision. So I'm just showing you there. That Leviticus 23, let's see if I can read it real quick. Who does not humble themselves on this very day, he should be cut off. And this talks about the Day of Atonement. So that same word, if you do not humble himself on this day, on the Day of Atonement, many of us just celebrated that, or I shouldn't even say celebrated, but you'll be cut off from his people. And then the Passover, same thing. If you are not clean, yet refrain from celebrating the Passover, he should be cut off from his people. So it kind of just gives you context on how important, we talk about abominations. Everyone goes to, again, homosexuality, like lying tongue is an abomination. So these are just more context of how to be cut off from his people. Let's see. So rabbinic commentary on this. So they note that transgression the command of circumcision in this verse is one of 36 transgressions that cause the transgressor to be cut off from his people. So same as I kind of said there. So these are different ways to be uncircumcised. So Jeremiah 6:10, uncircumcised ears. Exodus 6:12, uncircumcised lips. Uncircumcised heart in Deuteronomy. I've already talked about those. Your uncircumcised flesh in this chapter right here, this verse. Uncircumcised trees. This kind of hit me like, whoa, uncircumcised trees. So Leviticus 19:23, I'll post it. Chat, we don't have the bot anymore. When you enter the land and plant all kinds of trees for food, then you shall count their fruit as forbidden. For 3 years it shall be forbidden to you, it should not be eaten. So I guess they're saying those trees aren't good for you. I don't know what to make of that. Let's see. So obviously the great eighth day and Yahweh's circumcision, that's huge. And a lot of people know this, but like medical science today has discovered that an infant's blood does not clot properly until after an infant is 7 days old. And so that's interesting, right? If he's the creator of everything and it doesn't clot properly until the 8th day. Praise Yah. That's when he tells you to do that. I will hand it off to Noel. Maybe let him finish and then I'll finish and we'll open it up.
Yeah, so I found the passage I was looking at before over Sarah's name change. And so there is only a subtle difference between Sarai and Sarah, but it is an important difference. Sarah indicates a higher standing and status than Sarai. So Sarai signifies milady, or milady, or my princess, which confines her dominion to one family. But Sarah signifies either a lady or princess. Sounds similar, but it's different. It's without restriction, or it is the princess of a multitude. So as Sarai is really struggling here, and she's like, here, take Hagar, whatever, we'll make this work. It's not going to be through me. Yahuwah tells Abram, then Abraham, to go tell his wife. He says, you're going to be Sarah now. You're like, Yahuwah says that this, he's giving them hope in this. Now, this is what I really love here. It says in verse 17, it says, and Abraham fell on his face and wondered and said in his heart, shall the son of 100 years have progeny? And Sarah, the daughter of 90 years, bear a child. And it doesn't really stress it here as much in the Aramaic Targum. The Hebrew Masoretic basically makes it out that Abraham fell on his face and laughed. And so, much can be said, like, why is he laughing about this? Well, this is where it gets really awesome. Abraham's laugh was probably not one of cynical doubt. It is probably instead rejoicing in the news of what was to come. And here's why. The very name Isaac, or Yitzhak, means laughter. Yahuwah named him laughter after, and he gives his name right here, I think. Does he? After, now maybe not here, but anyways, Yahuwah named him laughter after Abraham laughed with joy at the news that he was going to have a son through Sarah. And just to reiterate here, because this was in the Romans study, I went through this several weeks back in Romans chapter 4, and when it says that, when he says, basically Abraham is asking, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Well, Abraham knew both he and Sarah were well past the time, people normally have children, no doubt, right? Yet it's very clear if you take Romans account, Paul, that he believed. And here's why. This is what Paul says in Romans 4:17-21. In the presence of him who he believed, Elohim, who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did, who contrary to hope, in hope believed. I've said that a lot in the last few weeks. I really like that line, hope beyond hope, as some translations put it. He had hope even though there was no hope to be had. The situation seemed so impossible that he would ever have a son through Sarah, not through some other woman. He had no problem having, I guess, a son through Hagar and others, but hope beyond hope, so that he became the father of many nations according to what was spoken, so shall your descendants be, and not being weak in faith. So he wasn't weak in faith. He was very strong in his faith. He did not consider his own body already dead, since he was about 100 years old. He did not waver at the promise of Elohim through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith, giving glory to Elohim, and being fully convinced that what he had promised, he was also able to perform. All right. So I don't have a lot more to give tonight. We do see here an interesting passage in verse 20. It says, and concerning Ishmael, I have heard thy prayer. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will. Oh yeah, he does say in verse 19 that you will call your son Yitzhak. So it does say that there. I didn't make that up. But anyways, behold, I have blessed him, and I will spread him abroad and multiply him greatly. 12 princes shall he beget. This is what I talked about earlier tonight, that there is a comparison or a contrast to be made between the 12 princes, the 12 tribes of Yaakov, with the 12 princes of Ishmael. Now, this kind of had my interest, and I'm like, well, are these 12 princes accounted for? And I guess that's debated. They're not really. I'll throw this in here, this little chart I dug up, if this makes any sense to you whatsoever. You can kind of see a little bit there of what perhaps has been tracked down. There has been people who have devoted their lives, apparently, to go into the Middle East and all through Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Yemen and you name it, all through there, Iraq and Afghanistan, and try to track down anybody who came from Ishmael, because that's kind of the whole story of Islam, right? That they came from Ishmael. We all say this generically, they're the children of Ishmael, but where is the genealogies, right? Well, I don't know if those tribes mean anything to you, but there's some listed there, and my understanding is that they're kind of nomadic tribes, goat herders and stuff. Like they kind of exist, but they're not like the children of Yasharel. And I had pointed this out earlier, that there was nothing special about the children of Yasharel. The only thing that was important was that about them is that they were given the Torah, that Yahuwah specifically entered a covenant with them, and they would have been nobodies otherwise. They probably would have not even existed today. We wouldn't know who they are. And yeah, we do need colors to that. I didn't make up this chart. This came from a website that was devoted to trying to track down these tribes. So maybe there's people out there who have done better research. Clearly, I quickly decided that if people have devoted their entire lives to trying to track down the tribes of Ishmael with little success, that I was not going to have much luck in a study session. So with that, I'm going to be concluding for the night. Michael, I'm going to hand it over to you for final comments, and then we will open it up for a roundtable afterwards. Back to you, Michael.
All right, I will finish this up. I have a few more comments and pictures to throw in here. No colors, unfortunately. Do as I say, not as I do, I guess. But so on 15 it says, this is where, and God said unto Abraham, as for Sarah thy wife, thou shalt not call her Sarah, but Sarah, I-N-H. And as you can see here, in Hebrew, Abram's name changed to Abraham, and Sarah's name changed to Sarah is affected by addition of a single letter, the letter He. So, a little bit kind of gematria that this letter He represented the number 5, and I'm just showing you some things about 5. I thought this was interesting because if you ever listen to our wisdom study, a lot of people will say it's 4 and 6, but because they don't want to say honor your father and mothers on the God side, which we would think it is. But the 10 Commandments contain 2 sets of 5 commandments. There are 5 primary types of offerings: burnt, sin, trespass, grain, and peace. I believe there's more than 5 books of God's law, but most people would say it's the first 5 books of the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Pentateuch is what it's called. Penta means 5. Tabernacle in the wilderness contained 5 curtains, 5 bars, pillars, sockets, an altar made of wood that was 5 cubits, and the height of the court of the tabernacle was also 5. So just kind of throwing that in there. Number 16, I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yes, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations, kings of people. So comment on, or show this was cool. This is the summary of this covenant. So at the beginning, it's as for me. That's part of the covenant. Many distinguished descendants and a promise of land. As for you is the middle. Abraham's part of the covenant, the sign of circumcision. He has to do stuff. Then as for Sarah, the last 2 are of Sarah. So I thought that was cool how splits it up there. So he does. Remember, I said he does all those things. As for you, hey Abraham, you need to do this. And then as for Sarah as well. Number 17, then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? So this is actually the second time Abraham has bowed down to Yahweh in adoration. We read it earlier in verse 3 where Abraham fell on his face and God talked to him. So he bowed down twice in this chapter. So Noel kind of hit on the laughter part. I want to just throw a couple. When God revealed to Abraham in this verse, Sarah Bella's son, he laughed. So it's in the next 3 chapters, laughter will be a repeated theme. When Sarah overheard the 3 holy men tell Abraham that she would yet bear a child, she likewise laughed. We'll get to that next week. And then Genesis 21, wanting everyone to join the rejoicing at this miracle, Abraham and Sarah chose to call their son Isaac, and they'll hit on that, which Hebrew word meaning laugh or laughter. Why is that? What do you guys make of that, of all the laughter? Have you guys laughed at God when I don't know, is it a testing of the faith? Okay, so now for my kind of take on these Ishmael tribes. As for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him and make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I'll make him a great nation. I deleted where this was from. I want to say Chronicles or something. And these are the generations, the firstborn of Ishmael: Nebaioth, Kedar, Abdel, Mizbam, Mishpa, Duma, Massa, Hadad, and Tema, Jeter, Japheth, and Kedema. These are the sons of Ishmael. Now, I'm going to take snippets from this article. I thought it was pretty decent. Kind of summaries of these names. And so that's the first one. So Jabajoth. In the Bible, Kedar and the tribe of Nabaat were renowned for sheep raising in Isaiah 67. Kedar is the next one I want to share. Known as the Kedarites, military power of the sons of Ishmael. Isaiah speaks of the Kedars' glory. They were gifted archers in these verses. Ezekiel 27:21 associates Arabia with all these princes of Kedar. They were a constant conflict with the Assyrians. Let's see. Nehemiah's opponent, Geshem the Arab, has been identified as one of the kings of Kedar. So, and I got two more on the princes. There it is. First Chronicles 1, 29 through 23, or 33. There's some color for you. Massa, I'm not going to read the yellow. Those holding to the theory that the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea into Arabia identified El Masar as the place where the Israelites murmured. So some say that's from Massa. And then finally on the tribes, for the princes, Tamah. The Assyrian king Sennacherib named one of his gates in the great city of Nineveh as the desert gate and records the gift of the Sumanite and the Temanite enter through it. From this we can recognize Tema was regarded as an important place. Around 552, Nabonidus, the king of Babylon, and his father Belshazzar made the city of Tema his residence and spent 10 of the 16 years of reign there. So it kind of links Babylon with him. Okay, so this is my last one. So 23, and we'll open it up. But I thought this was cool, and it's gonna make Sarah kind of in a bad light here. So, well, in Jubilees, Jasher does not. It sticks with the script here. So KJV says, "And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the same day." So Jasher 21 talks about this. And so, I even put that there. So, and Yah was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and he grew up and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him. And he took the bow and drew it and put the arrow in it, and it intended to slay Isaac. Sarah saw the act and grieved exceedingly, and she sent Abraham and said, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son." Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah, rose up, took 12 loaves, and gave it to Hagar and sent her away. Jasher is similar to the Targum, and I'm still in that camp. I'm trying to test these books out. I still see some rabbinic, maybe overtones in Jasher, because then you look at Jubilees and it's totally different. Jubilees. This is the last thing I have to share. Oh man, it's tough to read. Can you guys? It's tough. Oh wait, there it is. It's better. Okay, so this would be Jasher 17. I highlighted some things, but so in the first year of the 5th week, Isaac was weaned in this jubilee. Abraham made a great banquet. Then Ishmael, so he was before the face of Abraham, and Abraham rejoiced and blessed God because he had seen his sons and had not died childless. Number 3 says, "And he remembered the words which he had spoken to him on that day." 4, now look at this. "And Sarah saw Ishmael playing and dancing, Abraham rejoicing with great joy, and she became jealous of Ishmael and said to Abraham, 'Cast out this bondwoman. The son of the bondwoman will not be the heir.'" Then number 8 says he rose up early, did the bread and bottle of water, and got a bottle of water, except for hills or something, and then sent her way. Then ironically, this same chapter, number 16, we'll get to it eventually, but and Prince Mastema came to God. Behold, Abraham loves Isaac. So we'll get to this eventually. I know we'll talk about it, but it was Prince Mastema who told God. He went to God to have Abraham sacrifice Isaac. We'll get to that eventually. We'll have a lot more on that, but it was the same chapter, so I should bring it up now. What do you guys make about that? Jasher kind of sticks with the Targum about Isaac doing something bad, maybe. And then Jubilee says no. Sarah just became jealous that these two children were were getting along and playing and rejoicing. Let's see. Do I have any more? I don't think so. That is it. So that's all I got. I guess we'll hand it off to Noel if he has any last comments, and then we'll open it up.
So this is a little bit different this week because we're in the TUC stage and we're trying something out new. And if anybody wants to speak, have any comments, the way you do this is you raise your hand. We can bring you up on stage. And once I bring you up on stage, now that we're on the round table at the end, I'll just keep you up here, and you guys can, turn on your own mics and turn them off when you want. So it's handing it over to you guys now. If you guys again like to speak, just raise your hand. I'll bring you up, and we can all have a party up on the stage. The after party up on stage. You don't have to, you don't have to. Oh, okay. We have someone. Oh, we have two people raising their hands. So first up, this is Cyber Savior, bringing you up. What do you have to say? Any comments? Go for it. It's yours.
Mute yourself.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Earlier we were talking about the wild men, and I was like really excited about that. What a story! Oh my goodness. So the particular thing that caught me off guard was its ability to go through, say, one dimension to another. And I was thinking about Jasher, and Jasher gets this vibe about it that it can't be real because of like all the super like powers that that the 12 had. And when you're talking about the voice that knocked over people, if you recall, I think it was Jacob's sons. That's synonymous with Yahusha being able to speak into the Garden of Gethsemane and knock other people down. But I was curious with the wild men being ascribed to go through different dimensions in that sense. I say, Lucy, you'll correct this. I'm running out of battery, so I'm sure you'll get it figured out. But particularly, I believe they had access to like a supersonic voice, similar to like when we see him, we shall see him as he is. We'll be able to see a full spectrum through the visible angle and ultraviolet, infrared, and all that. So I wonder if they had that power from being able to step into the dimension of the Shamim, if you would. So I'm curious about that. I know it's pretty far out there, but go ahead and take it away.
So I don't know what to make of, obviously, and when we talked about Ishmael, there's probably many different translations, and depending on what books. I read directly from the Masoretic, which said he was a wild Adam, a wild man, and I don't know what to make of that. Right? I don't know if they're like what constitutes a wild man. How do you become a wild man? I mean, from what I've learned in literature and art and reading that stuff, wild men are typically, they're like a unique creation apart from humanity. So I don't really know how you can get a wild man out of Abraham and Hagar. I'll let you guys all decide on that. But yeah, I don't know really. I don't know what you wanted me to comment on, but my understanding from what I've read is that wild men have the ability to appear and disappear, and that they could be kind of among us and we wouldn't know that they're there. And there's very close, if people are having a hard time understanding what a wild man is, there are very close connections to be had with the Sasquatch today. The fact that they can, people are just living their lives, they're driving down the street and they look over and they're like, oh, there's a Sasquatch over there. They see it for like 5 seconds, right? And then it's gone. And people have actually talked about how they will appear and disappear. They've seen them do it. And that's actually one of the, that's not the kind of conversations people might have had in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but I have spoken to multiple people who have seen these Sasquatches, and they will say how they will talk and speak and, I'll do all sorts of stuff. And they have actually either seen them appear or disappear, or like in a split second, like they looked back and they were gone. And they felt like they were still there with them. And that would just explain why we don't see them. So was there anything else specifically you wanted to ask or comment on that?
Specifically, what I was thinking is, as it was a wild man, I wonder if you're talking about the serpent seed and how it's, the seed of Hasatan himself, and in that sense, what if the men were of the true lineage of faith all had that wild man ability? Some of them used it, some of them didn't have the ability to like know what it was, but they all had that in themselves because it was a part of who they originally were when they were built. And I wonder if we lose it because we're not part of that direct lineage. And that was kind of the vibe I was born with. So I'm curious a little bit on the thoughts on that, but you've been pretty far into it already.
Yeah, I can't really obviously answer that. That's the first I thought about that, and I don't know. But the thing is that one of the I will reiterate here is that one of the things about the post mud flood deception, where we find ourselves now, the if you want to call it the short season of Satan's deception, is that we are post Newtonian science, and what that means is that all of our understanding of reality is supposed to come through the material. The if I were to go out to the Christians in my neighborhood and try to tell them about this idea that there are spirits everywhere in the trees and the clouds and the lightning and the rain and all, they would just look at me and go like, what are you talking about? Like, we can explain this all scientifically. And this is why I have no problem reading these old texts and seeing a time where people were much more in tune with the spiritual reality around them. And by the way, when you read these old texts, the people who were contemporaries of Abraham, the Greeks would talk about the same thing, that they were like the Bronze Age. There was before them the Silver Age, and before that the Golden Age. And the Golden Age was just like, pure spiritual on the earth. And then, the silver was, more kind of not as refined as the gold. And then they were just like, they were mixed, bronze, they were, their understanding of the spiritual realm was much more convoluted. And yet we look back at that and like, oh my goodness, like if they were convoluted and if they were bad, then we're like really in some deep stuff. Because maybe it's all the chemtrailing. Maybe it's the fact that they really are killing our pineal gland and drying it up, and we just don't have that connection with the spiritual realm anymore. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna take it over. Yahusha wanted to say something, so I'm bringing you up. You are on the stage. Feel free to unmute yourself and say hi.
Yeah, man, there was a lot in there. Really good stuff. So I did write down a few things. Just want to touch on when you're talking about Ishmael's sons. There was a guy in the early 30s who followed Ishmael's, the 12 tribes of Ishmael's sons, and he ended up dying, I think, in the early 40s, and then his son ended up taking up the kind of the baton and running forward, and he tried to trace them all back to certain areas. But there is a lot of information in the Bible about the 12 tribes of Ishmael. Like Naboth is like spoken to the most of is in Isaiah. But I was when you were talking about the wild men, what kind of brought to me was that because they're really attributed with the Assyrians, and Josephus even talks about the 12 tribes of Ishmael and kind of where they went off to. But in Isaiah, they talk about them. I just looked at them, the wild men of war, like that they were just always fighting with, Isaac's, Jacob's sons and the other 12 tribes going around and killing all these people. And Kedar, like also in Isaiah, Kedar, who were the Kedarites, I think it was called. They're called, and Isaiah was talking about how that they were told to give them food and water to the fugitives. And you also see in Ezekiel and Jeremiah where it talks about Ishmael's sons. I just wanted to maybe if people were interested in looking up some of those scriptures, that we do see some of the Ishmael's sons kind of throughout the Tanakh, that we didn't lose them, I don't think, in that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Michael was talking about, he had mentioned about Hagar being Sarah's slave, like it was in reference to that. And what brought my attention to was when Laban, because I know when the women get married, that the father would give them like a handmaiden, like, or the slave to their daughters. And when Rachel and Leah were married to Jacob, Laban gave his slaves, Zilpah and Bilhah, to the girls, and then they gave them to Jacob. But it does actually call the girl, like Zilpah and Bilhah, it does refer to them as like Rachel's slave. So I'm just wondering if that is just like that this is because they were given to her as like a handmaiden, and then they were free to give them to their spouses or something. But I was thinking in my mind, like if they were Laban's original slaves, it kind of made me think, well, how old were those girls when they became their handmaidens or their slaves? And if they were Laban's slaves, did he have relations with them? And I mean, obviously maybe he didn't, or Jacob obviously would never have slept with them. It was just a thought that crossed my mind. But I was thinking about Laban when Jacob ended up coming to him. I was reminded of the story because Laban was just such a shyster. And I love the story of that when Jacob comes, and he comes kind of running out to Jacob, thinking that he was carrying riches and all this stuff when he had come, because he was probably remembering when Abraham had sent for Rebecca for Isaac, to thinking like, oh, he's got so much, because you know how Abraham's servant brought all these camels and jewels and gold and everything, and Laban had ran out. And I was just thinking of that. And so obviously Laban was thinking that Jacob was full of all these jewels and everything that he was going to give him. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's probably why he ended up making him work or for him, because he didn't have anything to give to him for his wives. But I just thought it was curious about the slave thing. And those are the couple things that kind of piqued my interest. Thank you.
So yeah, so and I just want to reiterate with the wild man statement that probably like freaks some people out. I'm completely open to any interpretation on this. I mean, I was even texting in there or writing in there to a Pam. Could it mean like wanderer? Something similar to Cain, that he was a wanderer of the earth. I had a lot of questions on it, but the thing that really struck me, and again, I don't have any uh, objective here to make him out into some, to like a green man type of person, but it specifically says wild man, and anytime I read that in ancient literature, like it's there's always a kind of a direct reference to that. Like there are wild men in passages like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the other book I read, the Colburn Bible, and many others I come across. So I just found that really interesting. I don't know what to make of it. There could be many explanations. Oh, and I should say too, on the tribes of Ishmael, you had pointed out the father who's dedicated his life to like researching, and then his son who picked it up. That's what I was talking about when I said that there are entire like people who live their lives trying to track these down, and they weren't entirely successful. That's why the son picked it up. My understanding is to try to find them out, and then of course Michael put a lot more information than I did. So like I mentioned before, that would be something that would take way more time to research that I've never looked into before. And I don't think it was till recently I was like, oh yeah, Ishmael had 12 tribes. I think that's kind of pretty cool to kind of figure all that out. So as you guys know, this is a new format tonight with the TUC stage. So if somebody wants to speak, raise your hand, come up to the stage. This is normally where it's just kind of open discussion. So it may feel a little bit different for you guys to make it more official to come up here. But just raise your hand. I'll bring you up here and you guys can chat away. This is the TUC after party stage show. It means you can listen in the audience, but we're up here beyond the mosh pit. You can you can get up here and get in a conversation.
Yeah, my point was just with the Ishmael tribes that we do see them in the Tanakh, is what I was saying, is that there is threads of that we do see quite a few of the sons interwoven throughout the Old Testament, that I don't think that they completely disappeared, that they still were interacting with a lot of the people in there, and that we do have threads of them. That's what I was just trying to kind of connect.
Paul's gonna hate this. He's gonna hate that. But hey, welcome, Paul. Paul Lindbergh. Paul on the Plane. If you guys don't know, if you guys have ever heard Paul on the Plane, he just joined us tonight. So Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to the group. And I think this is your first time that I've seen you appear here. So welcome. And we just finished up our discussion or our presentation, and we're kind of just open chat right now.
Anybody have any comments on the difference between Jubilees and Jasher, on how Sarah reacted and what Ishmael did? That was interesting. And for the new people, you have to raise your hand on the top right, and we'll unmute you.
And then you get a party up here on stage. Nobody.
Michael,
oh, go ahead.
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't too long to go ahead and read through those passages on that matter. Can you go ahead and read again? I was in the middle of a walk and I can't recall it. I know what you're referring to, but a refresher would be nice, and I think it'd only take but a few minutes.
Sure, yeah. Real quick, let me see. So in Jasher, Yah was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham. He grew up and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him, and he took the bow and drew it, put the arrow in it, intended to slay Isaac. Sarah saw it, and Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son, and it grieved her exceedingly. And then she sent Abraham to cast out the bondwoman and her son. Big difference in Jubilees, where Jubilees, it's Ishmael's with Abraham. He's before the face. Abraham's rejoicing, praising Yah that he has sons now, that he did not die childless. So here's the thing: Sarah saw Ishmael playing and dancing, and Abraham rejoicing with great joy. And she became jealous of Ishmael and said to Abraham, "Cast out the bondswoman." So that's the big difference. It's like Ishmael became an archer and tried to kill Isaac, and then in the Jubilees it says they were just playing, and Sarah became jealous and did the same thing. So different. Jalen asking to speak as well.
Come on up. Jalen, you can go ahead and speak. You could just have to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. I wasn't able to listen to the whole show. I was actually having the opportunity to witness to one of my neighbors. That's a big blessing. But I would say when you read it, Michael, that to me, I think there's a very real possibility that neither one of them are incorrect, that both events happened, and it was just the author was sharing one specific event instead of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 events that happened, to where Sarai was finally like, it's enough, get this kid out of here, because how we live in a family. And I might get in trouble for saying this, I'll try to say it carefully, but a man's perspective and a woman's perspective, a husband's perspective and a wife's perspective, they're not always the same thing, to where it seems like there's this feature where a wife can translate what a husband says, and it's not what the husband was thinking, if that makes sense. So I think in this case, we have the same situation happen, to where both events are true, but just shared, one left out from the other. And there's probably other events that we don't know. And I can't remember if it was Jasher or Jubilees, but I think it's one of those 2 books where Isaac was bragging that he would be able to, he would do anything. He'd be willing to die for his faith and his father. And that's why Abraham was called to go up and potentially sacrifice Isaac, if I recall hearing correctly. So there's so many things in the scriptures where we just have snapshots through different authors. So that's my long-winded answer to that question.
See,
Well, I would say you guys are a little quiet tonight, except there's not many people up here on stage with us.
I was gonna say something. Michael was speculating whether Hagar and Keturah might be the same wife, and I don't think they are. For one reason, in Book of the Cave of Treasures, it says very clearly that when Sarah died, Abraham took to wife, and it calls her Kentorah in here. It says she was the daughter of Baktor, the king of the desert. And then it tells, it names off 6 sons that she had, none of whom were Ishmael. So I feel like Ishmael and these other 6 sons are not the same people, and that Hagar is not the same wife. And it would be interesting to know where those 12 tribes came from Hagar. I mean, from Ishmael.
Yeah, I'd like to know that as well. And both of y'all, I'm bringing you up. You just need to unmute your mic and you could talk.
Hey, well, I was trying to look it up because I didn't remember reading it in Genesis, but I think you read it today, whatever in the Targum. Didn't it say that Ishmael would be made also a great nation, but he would have to do it by the sword? Maybe he kind of knew that about himself, and I mean, so that story, I forget which one it was. It could be true. I like what the guy said before. I don't know who that was. Who you saying? I think possibly both stories are true. But this idea that he might have tried to attempt to kill Isaac might be just him like, oh well, let's start my destiny now. I don't know.
That's actually really interesting. And it's funny how, you know, the whole Ishmael discussion, I'm feeling very not overwhelmed, but under-equipped, because I've never really done a study on the sons of Ishmael in scripture, and I bet they're all through there. I bet it's like anything, it's you start digging into it, I'm sure I would find his children all throughout there. So yeah, it was one of those things when I was doing this study, I'd never really picked up on it before, that there would be these 12 princes that came through him. And I'm like, what? Like, how did I miss that? It's kind of like when I was talking about the Hyperborea flood, or what I call the Hyperborea flood, that I've read through Jasher a dozen times. I don't know. And I never really picked up on the fact that there was a flood that destroyed a third of the world. And it's just there. And you just read right past it. It's like, what?
But Isaac and Ishmael got together when Abraham died and buried him, did they not? Like, I can't remember which it was in Genesis somewhere that they, after Abraham died, that you think that if they really hated one another, but maybe they were just respecting their father and taking him to the cave of Machpelah and burying him.
Yeah, it was the same way with Yaakov and Esau, that they also went to the same cave. And I'll go ahead and say it now. I think somebody in the Targum, the Aramaic Targum, somebody lops off the head of Esau and it goes rolling into the cave, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll have to read about that when we get there. But it wasn't, the relations weren't that hot with them or their families either. Was it the sons of Ishmael, I think, who, now that I'm thinking about it, who sold Joseph or bought Joseph as a slave and took him to Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look at that again.
Yeah, no, it's true. It was the sons of Ishmael.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, because it's like it's all a family story. It's like this big quilt, of just family relations, and they all probably knew each other, and it wouldn't have been much for them to, to meet someone out there in the wilderness and go, oh, okay, your father's father was such and such. That's my, uh, uncle's cousin. And, you just figure it out really quickly. Like they knew they were buying a slave from, Yitzhak, from his grandchildren. So yeah, it's really interesting.
I had something that occurred to me that I wanted to bring up. We've been talking. This is going back to the whole, the floods and the mud floods and all the resets. There's something that I'd never heard of before that I came across in Book of the Cave of Treasures, and it's talking about a wind flood, and that's the exact words it uses, wind flood, and it was in the time of Nahor. I guess that would be the grandfather of Abraham, because his daughter, I believe, or no, maybe great grandfather, because I think it was his daughter begat Terah, which was Abraham's father. So, but it was talking about how it was for a different reason than the Noah's flood. He said they in that book they say that Yahuwah sent the Noah's flood because of the wickedness and the fornication of the children of Cain. It had just become so wicked with the fornication. But the reason that the wind flood was sent was in the time of Nahor was because everyone was worshiping idols. In fact, that's a huge theme all throughout Abraham's life, even in his childhood, where his father sends him out to sell idols. And he's not really into the family business of selling idols. But according to this book, the wind flood buried all the idols. I mean, he sent such winds that it created mounds and it buried all the idols, and it was because of idolatry. So
And
I just thought that was interesting.
That was the same reason also for the flood of Enosh, according to the book of Jasher, and the countertext I read from the Corbin Bible from the book of Gleanings, that it was but it was for the purpose of idolatry, trying to end it, that he destroyed a third of the world with a flood. So yeah, idolatry is a big deal for Yahuwah, particularly anyone that's in a covenant with him like that. He takes great offense at idols.
I just thought that was interesting that didn't make it into canon, but I mean, it killed a lot. It had to have killed a bunch of people. I mean, they call it a flood, and it buried all the current idols. I guess what they had been doing, it describes that in that time the custom in the pagan societies was that, like, when your parent died or whatever, you would make some gold image and put it up on their gravestone, and the devils would literally enter into it and speak. It's kind of like some sort of seance and something, and it would convince them, and then the devils would speak through these things and get them to sacrifice their children. So again, child sacrifice and all that.
Yeah, that was actually something similar to that is in the book of Jasher, and it is with Leah and Rebecca, or Rivka, Leah and Rivka, and Yaakov, when they're escaping from Laban. Rivka takes Rachel. I'm sorry, Rebecca was Yitzhak's wife. It's getting late. When Rachel takes she takes Laban's these heads. I can't remember what they're called. They actually appear again with David's wife in 1 Samuel. David's wife being Saul's daughter, that she was into the worship of these heads. So that was obviously creeping into even Jerusalem at that time from the Hebrews. But she took the heads that they would like put these like gold or some sort of tablets on their tongues. They were like mummified heads. And the same thing, the demons, devils, spirits would speak through these heads and tell fortune. And so she took it, and so that Laban couldn't figure out where they're at. Well, in Genesis, it talks about how she's sitting on a trunk, and or whatever, and she wouldn't raise from it, and because she said she was in her time of the month, which I guess she lied about that. But according to Jasher, it tells that what was in there were those heads. So that's kind of interesting. That's similar to what you see in, I think, the Cave of Treasures, correct?
Yeah, a very similar type of idol worship. Basically spiritism, where you're inviting things in that it's not just an image of something. There's something in there.
Which is idols. I mean, idols are Yahuwah hates them. Okay, I don't want to make them a light matter, but taking a human head and mummifying it and placing on a pole or over your fireplace or whatever, like, that's dark. Like, I don't want to walk out to my living room and see like a like a head with a jaw gaping open and with hair. Like, just sounds awful. Like it. But of course, all of us, if we go walking around through our neighborhood right now, it's not so different from that. If you just walk down the street and how morbid Halloween is right now, and it definitely does. It definitely does play or showcase the desire of men's hearts and how dark they truly are. So I suppose that if something were to become acceptable like this, and where you actually use heads to have the spirit speak to you, that would become a practice that a lot of people would become accustomed to.
I believe there was some mention of that also in Legends of the Jews. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm fairly certain it talked about the same types of things. It didn't go into quite as much gory detail as that, but yeah, same thing. It's interesting that the Cave of Treasures actually mentioned, that they would sacrifice the children. The Legends of the Jews glossed over some of that. I mean, they talked about Moloch and stuff, but I think a lot of these religions sacrificed children. It wasn't just the Moloch sect.
Douglas is raising his hand. I want to bring him
All
in.
right. All right, Douglas, you are about to pop on. There you are. So just unmute yourself and you can talk.
Stage and forever. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I wanted to share a story about there's this Bill Schneblin, who was a Mormon, other things. When he became a Christian, he went on a kind of a trip around the country with a friend of his, and they had a ministry called Saints Alive, and they went to where a Mormon temple was being constructed in Spokane, I think it was, and they snuck in there at night and they put Bibles in the footings where they would pour the foundation over him, and and they said a bunch of prayers, and then they that actually had an impact because there's a practice of baptizing the dead that the Mormons do that he was very aware of because he was a Mormon for a time, and where the spirit of this dead relative in a certain temple that you go in appears and floats around and says, oh, it's Granny, and then he said that this temple, whenever they had that ceremony, it just wouldn't work, nothing would happen, and that people would see like these like lizard people in the hallways, and the lizard people would freak out because they didn't think they would be seen, and it's like everything got just turned into chaos. And so I know the Mormon doctrine is like super satanic, but and Freemason it's just like infused with that spirit of Freemasonry too. But thought that was relevant, given the what is an object? I guess an idol, but there's another word for idol. But I guess you could say that a Ouija board is an idol if it's for speaking to demons. So.
So you're basically saying the ending to that story is kind of like the ending to They Live, where uh, they were they were suddenly able to see the lizard people in the hallways of the Mormon church.
Yes, only the glasses in this case were the prayers and the dedicated efforts of those two ministers,
Nice.
what, Bill Schneblin and I can't remember the other guy's name, who took it upon themselves to do that. And they also the same group went and did a bunch of praying on the front steps of that Masonic temple in Washington that has the big sphinxes on each side, and the address is 1733, which is Q33, and they were praying at the front door. They were doing all these prayers, and the custodian of the building like opened the door and like saw them and just looked totally horrified and slammed the door. But they did ballsy stuff like that, which I would love to be able to do that.
Hey, Douglas, wasn't wasn't he the one that was a like a 32nd or 33-degree Mason, and he was a vampire?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, he started out when he was young. He was the kind of kid who like he had a regular family. I don't think they were Catholic, or yeah, they were Catholic. And he on Halloween one night when he was like 9 years old, he looked at the sky and it was just swimming with demons. He couldn't see a normal sky, and his life kind of took a weird turn after that, and he became a Satan. Oh, he went to Catholic seminary. He went to become a priest, and he was a priest. I think he was probably headed to be a Jesuit, but he he said that he was told by his teachers that Jesus was a witch, and the disciples were his coven, and that if you want to be like Jesus, then you have to do all this satanic stuff. And he was like, oh, that's how he got sucked into it, because he was super eager to please God. And
Hmm.
yeah, and but then he got into vampirism, and he was actually part of the Illuminati. And there's a point where you can decide whether you want to be, or when you're pursuing being like a master Satanist, you have to decide at some point if you're going to be a vampire or a werewolf. And
Werewolf.
yeah, werewolf, yeah. And he didn't like the werewolf ritual. He said it was just he wouldn't even talk about it. And I have some ideas of what it probably is, but he chose to become a vampire, and he even has these diagrams of the coffin that he had to build for himself to sleep in, and all the sigils that go on certain sides of it, and it has to sit a certain way on planet Earth according to north, south, east, and west, and pretty fascinating that he actually did that and came out of it. That's what's amazing to me. But he's a scholar. He's super super smart. He's written tons of books by now. Mostly, all of them are for God, thankfully for Yahweh. But and he's actually a Torah observant. He's hardcore Torah. He always wears a prayer shawl, and he has a super long beard, and I mean he's straight up Torah. So it's pretty fascinating. Even though he's born again, whatever the proper term is for that. I call it being changed and made compatible with God. So that's what happened to me. I wasn't going to church or anything like that. So yeah, Bill Schneblin is fascinating. Yeah, he has a YouTube page. He does a lot of videos. I mean, everything that's going on that needs to be discussed spiritually, he does a video on, and he's got hundreds probably by now. And it's called With One Accord Ministries. That's what it's called. And it's got so many amazing stories that he tells about surviving, Satan after becoming a Christian.
Good stuff.
I wanted to make a comment on when you're talking about Rebecca taking the idol and putting it in her sack and the camel. I often wondered whether if that's why she died, because when Laban was pursuing him and he came to Jacob, and Jacob said like, hey, like if you find the idol, like this person shall not live like among our relatives and stuff. And I always thought whether if Jacob kind of cursed her in some ways, or if Yahweh did, because she did take the idol and it was not supposed to be taken in that. It always made me quite curious about that. And then I just have one more comment on when you were talking about Sarah blaming Abraham for not kind of giving her a child. I was thinking that Rachel did the same thing to Jacob, and it was kind of funny when Jacob became really angry, and he kind of says, I'm paraphrasing, so like who am I? Like, am I God to give you a child or something like that? And I think that we see a few instances in the Bible of of the women kind of blaming the men of. I'm not sure whether Hannah blamed Elkanah or not, but I know that there was a lot of strife there with that as well. Anyways, I just wanted to make those two comments before I forgot.
Well, they're both really good comments. So on the first one, I never really thought of that until you pointed that out. But now in Jasher, was it Yaakov, Jacob, that said that whoever had it would be cursed? Was he the one that said it, or was it Laban?
No, it was Jake. Well, I don't know about Yasher, but in Genesis it says that Jacob was the one that said that he said to Laban, like, if he was like, why did you take my God? And Jacob said something like, well, if whoever you find it with, you can like they won't live among our presence or something like that. I can try and find the scripture for you.
Yeah, that's an ouch, because there was a similar incident that happened in was it Judges, I think. And I'd have to look up the story, but there's the story of the father who he said like the next person who walks through this door, they're gonna die. And his daughter walks through. And and she died. I think he had to kill her. And it was basically the idea that what you say is your words are important. You vow something, you better be serious about it. And so that's really stunning. I never put that together before, but you're probably absolutely right on that.
It's
And
in Genesis. Sorry to cut you off there. Genesis 31, 25. It starts is when Laban catches up with Jacob, and then if you read down, he said like, I wanted to kiss my grandchildren, my daughter, and then in 29 it picks up. It says, it is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. Now you have indeed gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? Then Jacob replied to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. The one with whom you find your God shall not live in the presence of our relatives. Point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself. And now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them.
yeah, so that's we hear about cursing other people, but I mean in this instance that you just mentioned, the one I mentioned from Judges, it's like you can curse people that you don't even know you're doing it. And we should all, that should all give us pause, and the things we say about others, and even if we don't think we're talking about someone specifically, that should all give us a pause on that. The other one you mentioned was wives blaming husbands and that kind of stuff. And the reading through the Sarah and Abraham passage now, and then also with Rachel and Yaakov, with her sister Leah. And of course, Leah had no problem pumping out the children. She was just a child factory, one after the next. And her sister, her younger sister, who Yaakov loved, she's getting really upset because she's not able to have children. And I don't know if there's anybody listening that has dealt with this, with infertility issues. It is really, really difficult. And I mean, I could say this, that Sarah and I went through this for many, many years. And this wasn't even a polygynous relationship. I mean, it wasn't like I had two wives and one of them is turning them out and the other wife's like, what about me over here, right? It was the two of us. And I mean, I haven't really talked about it much because it's very personal, but is really, really difficult when you see so many people having children and they don't even want the children. I mean, it was so, and we were just like getting so sick of hearing it. And we wanted them so badly, and it's like, what are we doing wrong? And yeah, angry at us, and it affects the bedroom life too, because it's you're like, you start realizing that it's failure. Like, this idea of sexual pleasure, it's not producing anything, it's not working, you're not doing it right, and it just becomes a drain of intimacy, and it's very, very difficult to go through. And so when Sarah, in her Abraham's wife, and her desperation, is saying this kind of stuff, I don't fault her. I'm like, I get it. I understand. I've been on the receiving end of like where Abraham is. And we didn't go through like 25 years of infertility. We went through like 15 years. There's still a lot of I mean, like 10 less than them, but it was a lot of years. It was very difficult. And you just feel like, uh I don't know. I mean, I just remember when she finally got pregnant, it was just like, it was the most amazing gift ever from Yah. And again, when we had another child recently, Rivka, our daughter, guys, it's been almost a decade between children. Like, we just thought we'd never have children again. And we weren't expecting it. Here I'm in my 40s, and we had a surprise. Here she is. She surprised us, and the most amazing thing ever. It's because it's in a way so much more precious to us, because it's something that was very hard to get to begin with. So um, I don't know what it's like in a polygynous relationship. Obviously, that would obviously complicate things, but I do get it from their end, or what the things that Sarah would say. So
Yeah, my heart would definitely go out to, couples that aren't able to conceive. And I know that it's deeply sorrowful, especially for a woman, longing to have children. And I think because, I think a lot of women even long to have children, especially when their kind of biological time clock starts ticking and they get in their older years. And I think there's so much pressure that society puts on, like, or a doctor saying, oh, well, you can't have children, past 35, which is ridiculous. But they put a lot of pressure saying that all these things could potentially happen. I think that that's a lie in my own personal self. I think that women can bear children right up, obviously until they have their cycles. But I think that it is a very deep grieving process. And obviously you and your wife were super strong in order to work through that and get through that. And I have my one girlfriend could never have children. They end up adopting out of another country. But I just remember even just the pain of having to go through that. It's painful for the person, and it's also painful for people to watch the longing of that. And you're right that there is a lot of people that have children that don't want them, which is super sad because there's such a blessing to us from Yah.
it's actually interesting how many in Scripture were very old and without children. So, I mean, Sarah and Abraham is one example, but there are others. There was uh, Yitzchak and Rivka could not have children for the longest time. And then when they finally did, they had twins, which is our story pretty much. We couldn't have it for years, and we ended up with twins. And then, of course, the same thing we see with Rachel, couldn't have children. But you go, there's others, but you even get to the New Testament, and John the Baptist's mother, um, Elizabeth, she was very old as well, and couldn't have children. And if you read some of the what we call extra biblical, there's several gospels, like the let's see, what are they? It's been a while, but the infancy gospel of Matthew is perhaps one, but then there's a couple others. And they also, the Colburn Bible talks about it too, that yeah, they were really old, and basically, like, the other women were telling Elizabeth, like, you can't come to the temple. You've clearly, you're not blessed by Yah, you've sinned, what are you doing here? And she would run away weeping as an old woman, because she so desperately wanted a child. And then what do you see happen when she has the child? Her husband is murdered, and she goes running off because the Herod's boys are trying to kill her child, and she has to live in a cave to keep him safe. But it's pretty crazy stories. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of those kind of infertility stories in the Bible. It seems that Yah really likes to work through the impossible and get people to a point where they realize, like, yeah, there's nothing we did to do this. Like, this is all Yah. He did all of this.
And look how many great people came out of that. So, you know, your children could grow up to be very amazing warriors in Yahweh's kingdom. Hallelujah.